The first time Tywin Lannister descended beneath the oldest bones of Casterly Rock, he did so not as Lord of the Rock, but as a son. His father's footsteps echoed behind him, light and uncertain upon the narrow stone stair. Lord Tytos held a lantern high, the flame guttering in unseen drafts, throwing wild shadows along the rough-carved tunnel. The air was cool and wet, sharp with salt from the western sea pounding far below, and tinged with something older than salt, older than stone, a smell like cold iron and burned herbs, faint as a half-remembered dream. "Nearly there, Tywin," Tytos murmured, as if afraid of waking something that slept in the depths. "Your grandfather showed me this when I came of age. His father showed him." Tywin said nothing. He had been summoned from his studies with the Maester, and told only that there was a duty he must learn. He was 13, long-limbed and hard-eyed, already taller than his father. Where Tytos' features sagged with indulgence and good living, Tywin's were cut in hard lines, a face that looked like it would grow into a sword. He watched his father's shaking hand on the lantern, the way the flame trembled with each step. It filled him with a tight, familiar coldness. Tytos had never been able to keep his hand steady in anything that mattered. The stair turned sharply and widened into a low, vaulted passage. Ahead, the lantern light fell upon a door. It was not like the doors above, not oak bound with iron, nor polished wood carved with the leaping lion. This door was stone, seamless and pale as old bone, set directly into the rock. Its surface was carved with a maze of lines and sigils, worn but not worn away, as if the stone itself refused the slow gnawing of time. At its center, a lion's head emerged in high relief, magnificently detailed. Curling mane, bared teeth, eyes set with two cloudy yellowish crystals that caught the lantern's glow and held it like captive stars. Tywin stopped without meaning to. His breath misted faintly in the cold. "There is no key," Tytos said, setting the lantern on the floor with excessive care. "Our blood is the key." He pressed his palm against the lion's snout. For a heartbeat, nothing changed, and Tywin thought, of course, this would be another of his father's foolish tales. And then the lion's crystal eyes kindled from within. The lines carved across the door flared briefly with dull golden light that seeped into the stone like wine into cloth. Something behind the door shifted. Not a bar, not a lock. It was as if the rock itself had taken a breath. The door opened inward without seam or sound. Beyond lay a narrow chamber, no larger than Tywin's bedchamber above, though its roof was higher and arched like a sept ceiling. 3 walls were bare rock. The 4th was made of the same bone-pale stone as the door, and carved with the same intricate sigils. But here the carvings framed 3 things. At the center, upon a narrow stand of black iron, rested a circlet of gold. It was shaped like a lion biting its own tail, the muzzle closing over the tip of its own tail with delicate ferocity. Tiny rubies ran along its length, each one carved into the suggestion of an eye, so that when the lantern light touched it, it seemed ringed with watchful, bloody pupils. The gold was not the bright yellow of Lannister wealth, but deeper, almost reddish, like metal seen through a thin veil of smoke. To the left of the circlet lay a dagger sheathed in black leather. Its pommel was shaped like a snarling lion in miniature, mouth agape, teeth sharpened. What little of the blade showed at the throat of the sheath gleamed dark, rippling with the telltale sheen of Valyrian steel. To the right stood what looked at first like a rod of carved bone no longer than Tywin's forearm, banded with bronze rings. A closer look showed faint, twisting symbols burned along its length. And where the bronze rings met bone, there were inlaid chips of something that was neither metal nor stone, shimmering faintly like glass caught at twilight. "The lion's diadem," Tytos said softly, nodding to the circlet. "The first blade, the listening rod." The titles sounded rehearsed, phrases passed from mouth to mouth over centuries. Relics of Lan the Clever, or so the tales say. Tywin stepped forward, each motion carefully controlled. "Tales rarely trouble themselves with the truth," he said. "Especially tales about our ancestors stealing castles with riddles and songs. Titos gave him a strained smile. Not all of it is songs, my son. Our lineage is older than gold and contracts and marriage pacts. Lan was no common trickster. He had sorceries, and enemies who hated him for them. Tywin's lip curled faintly, but not in open scorn. Sorcery. He had heard the Septon's mutterings about abominations, had read the Maester's dry dismissals of hedge wizard mumbo-jumbo, always second-hand and distant. This was different. This was here, beneath his feet, under his house. These things, Titos went on, were gathered by his descendants. Protecting them is the first duty of House Lannister. Using them, his mouth twitched. Using them is the last resort. Tywin looked at the circlet. What do they do? Titos swallowed. His throat worked. The diadem lets a Lannister hear lies, and truths that think themselves safe. The blade kills not only flesh but name. The rod listens to all things made by magic. The citadel would melt them if they knew. The faith would howl. The rock would be besieged by every king and pretender from here to Ashai. Nay. Tywin's mind moved swiftly, assembling the implications into quiet, ruthless order. Here lies. Strike at names. Listen to magic. If such things were true, if they worked, then the power of gold and steel and men was only a foundation. This was something else entirely. Why have we not used them? He asked. We've been mocked, raided, shamed. Our coffers have saved us, but they have also made us puppets. Why lock these things away, if they work as you say? Titos' eyes flinched from his. Because they take, he whispered. They always take. Lan died laughing, they say, and his enemies howled, but his line paid for centuries. Every time the diadem is worn, a debt is owed. Every time the blade is drawn, a name is cut from the world, but the cut bleeds backward too. Every time the rod listens, something else learns the sound of your name. Tywin regarded his father as if seeing him anew. And yet we keep them. We are Lannisters, Titos said. We are keepers of debts. These are the oldest debts of all. No. He reached for the circlet with trembling hands, but stopped an inch shy of it. My father never wore it, he murmured. Nor did I. Perhaps I was afraid. Or perhaps I thought we had enough with what the rock gave us. But you, Tywin? He turned, eyes luminous in the lantern light. You are stronger than I am. Harder. You must know they exist. One day you will be Lord of Casterly Rock, and you will have to decide whether the world is worth the cost of using them. Tywin looked at the diadem, at the blade, at the rod. He imagined squinting creditors and grasping bannermen, the laughter of lords who thought Lannister gold a leash around his father's throat. He imagined banners burning, the lion's crimson and gold raised above every hall from Winterfell to Sunspear. He imagined a world where no one dared smile behind their hands at a Lannister, where the very thought of cheating them turned to ash on the tongue. I will decide, he said. He did not touch the circlet. Not that night. Not yet. Years rolled over Westeros like slow, grinding stones. Rebellions rose and were crushed. Kings feasted and died. Children were born, named, and promised away to strangers. Beneath it all, beneath the rock, the chamber slept with its lion-eyed door and its silent, watching artifacts. Tywin Lannister grew into his face, smoothed into the cruel, clean lines that would one day be carved in song and fear. He learned to wield power in the ways men understood, through coin and steel, marriage and law. He married Joanna and lost her. He broke House Rain and House Tarbeck into red ruin and made their songs a warning instead of a joke. The Westerlands remembered what it meant to fear the roar of the lion. It might have been enough for another man. Then, in a hot summer of heavy, buzzing flies and restless rumors from the east about dragons and shadows, Tywin descended again into the depths. He went alone, carrying his own lantern. His hair was already receding, streaked with threads of steel at the temples. His eyes had not softened with years. If anything, they had grown harder. like gold hammered under the smith's hand until it could cut. The lion door opened at his touch with the same soundless shudder. The chamber had not changed. Dust did not seem to settle here. The circlet lay where it had, the diadem's rubies dull in the lantern light. The blade still slept in its black sheath. The listening rod gleamed with that same twilight shimmer. Tywin set the lantern down, the flame steady in his grasp. The realm is crumbling, he thought. Aerys is mad, burning men for sport, trusting no one. The prince plays at prophecy while Rhaegar's wife births fragile, silver babes in a city that smells of piss and ash. My children are pawns of a half-mad dragon and his court of sycophants. The fools in the Reach and the Stormlands circle each other like stags in rut, and the North remembers only its own cold. The Lannisters have gold, but not the last word. He reached for the lion's diadem. His fingers closed around it. The gold was warmer than it should have been, as if another hand had just relinquished it. The rubies seemed to catch his gaze, tiny bloody eyes glittering up at him. For a moment, Ty remembered his father's voice. Every time it's worn, a debt is owed. Then he placed the circlet upon his brow. The world tilted. The chamber fell away, but not into darkness. It was as if the stone itself had turned transparent, and beyond it Tywin saw, felt, voices. Not just the slow drip of underground water, the distant rage of the sea, but murmurs and whispers carried along unseen lines that stretched from the rock to every corner of the realm. Lies. Not words, not yet, but the shape of lies. It was like suddenly standing in a hall whose rafters crawled with rats, and knowing, without counting, the number of claws and teeth and staring eyes hidden in every shadow. He staggered, a hand going out to brace himself against the carved wall. The diadem tightened, as if aware of his weakness. For a heartbeat, he thought he felt something sharp bite into his scalp. Then slowly, the chaos resolved into patterns. The strongest lies burned brightest. Aerys's voice echoed from King's Landing, drenched in wildfire smoke and fear. He heard the creak of chains, the screams of men called traitors because they had spoken truth 3 days earlier. He heard the quiet, venomous assurances of courtiers who told the king what he wanted to hear. He heard Rhaegar's murmured promises to his Dornish wife. He heard a girl in the north swear to her friend she did not dream of princes. He heard a merchant in Lannisport insist his scales were honest. 100,000 lies, most small and sour as spilled wine. A few vast and black-limbed, like cracks in the foundation of the world. Under it all, pervasive and thin as spider silk, he heard another lie. It ran through the rock itself, down into the sea, across old roads and broken barrows. It hummed in the bones of hills older than kingdoms. It was the lie the world told itself to stay asleep. Magic is gone. Magic is dead. Tywin clenched his jaw. His heart hammered in his chest, not with fear, but with something colder and more dangerous. Purpose. Wake up then, he muttered under his breath. As if in response, the listening rod trembled. He did not touch it. Not yet. One debt at a time. He tore the circlet from his head. As it left his brow, a thin trickle of blood ran from his temple to his jaw, hot against the chill air. The diadem drank it. The rubies flashed, then dimmed. Tywin wiped his face with the back of his hand and left the chamber. On the morrow, he went to King's Landing. The realm knows the shape of that story. Aerys' madness, Brandon Stark's wild ride to the capital and his death by strangling, the smell of burning flesh in the throne room, the king's laughter echoing off blackened stone. Each of those events gathered around them a cloud of stories, half-truths and lies and embellishments. What the singers do not know is how many of those moments were touched by a Lannister hand, guided by a Lannister's knowledge that every word spoken to the Mad King would be weighed against an invisible ledger. Tywin listened. He listened to lies whispered in the Red Keep's galleries, to confessions muttered in guild halls, to rumors crossing the Blackwater on ferries and trading ships. The diadem showed him where oaths bent and where they would break. With that understanding, he shifted his weight at the right moments, like a man nudging a cart on a slope. He knew how much truth lay in the rumors that Rhaegar had stolen Lyanna Stark, and how much was angry northern embellishment. He knew which lords truly burned to rise against the dragon, and which only feigned outrage. He knew, down to the day when the balance would tip. When Robert Baratheon took up his warhammer, Tywin did not march. He waited, and in the depths of Casterly Rock, the listening rod awoke. It began with a raven from Korth. The letter was obsequious on its surface, all curling compliments and ornate titles. But the hand that wrote it belonged to a man who had once traded in slaves and strange wares. He mentioned, almost in passing, that there were certain curiosities on the market. Old Valyrian trifles, things of no concern to sensible Westerosi lords, but perhaps of interest to collectors of oddities. There is a threefold egg, warm to the touch. There is a horn that sings of stone. There is a knife that drinks more than blood. Tywin summoned Qyburn then, though the man was not yet disgraced and exiled, only a quiet maester of troubled past and keen, unsettling curiosity. He had come west when the citadel had grown too small for him. Tywin valued men who wanted more than their proper place, so long as they understood who held the leash. "Read this," Tywin said, passing the letter across his desk. Qyburn's eyes flicked down the page faster than most men could skim. "Curiosities," he murmured. Perhaps the East is starting to empty its cupboards before something blows the dust away entirely." "You believe magic is stirring," Tywin said. It was not a question. He had heard the lie in the maester's mouth when he'd once remarked, very carefully, that of course the age of dragons was long past and nothing remained of such nonsense. "I believe," Qyburn said, with that small, polite smile that never reached his eyes, "that if the East is selling, we should be buying." Tywin let himself consider briefly the storm of scorn his father would have faced for even entertaining the notion. Tytos Lannister, writing polite letters to strange merchants about dragon eggs. The thought evoked contempt, not because of the eggs, but because Tytos would have let himself be cheated. "I will not be made a fool of," Tywin said. "If these things are trinkets, I will have the man's tongue. If they are not, I will have them. You will go, Qyburn. Take as much gold as you require, and men you trust not to talk." Qyburn inclined his head. "As you wish, my lord." He hesitated. "If I may suggest, fire is a patient thing, but once it catches, it runs. The world beyond the narrow sea is dry tinder. If these are the first sparks, there will be more. Someone should be listening." "Nah." Tywin thought of the listening rod beneath the rock that thrummed faintly whenever he wore the diadem, and walked the halls alone in the small hours. "Someone is," he said. The war raged. The trident ran red. Rhaegar died, and with him many of the old prophecies men had muttered to themselves in dark rooms. King's Landing burned, not completely, but enough to scar it forever. Tywin arrived at Robert's side wearing good steel and good manners, with Lannister men and their thousands in carts laden with enough gold to feed 10 sieges. He entered the Red Keep not as a conqueror storming the gates, but as an inevitable creditor come to collect. Bodies cooled on the steps of the throne room. Elia Martell and her children. Aerys himself, cut by his own Kingsguard. Tywin looked upon the Iron Throne, all barbs and twisted metal, and did not let the diadem's weight show in his eyes. The throne whispered. He could feel it, faint and hungry, even without touching it. The swords fused into its shape remembered fire and blood. They remembered pain and surrender. They remembered oaths broken and kept beneath the dragon banners. The throne was a wound given form, and wounds festered without something to clean them. He wondered briefly what would happen if he set the listening rod beneath its base and let the two know each other. Not yet, he thought. Robert took the crown, though it fitted him poorly. John Aaron stood at his shoulder. Ned Stark glowered in the shadows, his northern honor bristling at the stains on the walls. Tywin bent the knee to the new king with all the correct words and none of the warmth. Behind him, a quiet rotation of wagons began. Dragon skulls, old scrolls, curious horns, chests with false bottoms, all loaded under cover of the general plundering and sent west. Dragon bones are not gold, Jaime observed once, watching the procession with a young man's impatience. We could buy 10 companies of swords with what it costs to ship those ugly skulls. Tywin did not answer immediately. His son's face was still unlined, his arrogance untempered by the years, his knighthood bright as new coin. He was everything Tywin had made him and not nearly enough. There are swords that shatter in the first hard battle, Tywin said at last, and swords that are passed from father to son for 300 years. Do you know the difference, Jaime? The smith, Jaime said promptly. Tywin's mouth tightened. The story, he said. The man who holds the old sword believes in what it means more than the man who holds the new. These skulls are old swords. We will be the ones who decide what they mean. Jaime frowned, uncomprehending. In Casterly Rock's deepest vaults, dragon skulls watched in darkness, and the listening rod leaned where it had been set between them. The air around it hummed with a tension that had nothing to do with collapsing stone. Qyburn returned from Korth with 3 eggs. He laid them upon Tywin's desk with almost reverent care. One black as coal shot through with iridescent red, one green swirled with bronze, one pale cream tinged with gold. They were heavier than they looked. When Tywin laid his hands upon them, he felt a deep, slow cold, like the heart of a mountain in winter. They call them dragon eggs, Qyburn said. The merchant swore his grandsire took them from the smoking ruins of Valyria itself. I do not think he was lying. Tywin did not bother asking how Qyburn knew. Do they hatch? Not for me, Qyburn said. Not yet. But there is. He paused, eyes flicking to the listening rod's faint outline on the map of the rock that hung behind Tywin's chair, as if he could sense it even through parchment. There is a sound when I sleep near them. Like a heartbeat, if a heart weighed as much as a tower. Tywin gazed at the eggs. Dragons were not merely a symbol of Targaryen rule. They had been rule. Fire in the sky, fire that melted stone and armies alike. If such power could belong to lions instead, how many magical things do you know of? Tywin asked quietly. Qyburn's eyebrows rose. In the world, my lord? Far too many. In Westeros alone there are Valyrian blades, old weirwoods, black stones that drink the sun, horned relics, possibly the wall itself. Eastward, in Ashai and beyond. I have read of... He stopped himself, fingers twitching. Why do you ask? Because, Tywin said. I intend to have them. Qyburn stared at him, then bowed his head with something very like genuine avidity. Then we will need ships, and silence, and patience. We have all 3, Tywin said. The game that followed had no name in the songs. The bards would later mention, in passing, that Lannister gold reached from Yee to IB, buying strange luxuries, but they would not know what those luxuries were. Merchants disappeared. Graves were robbed. A septon in Old Town who had written a dangerous treatise about the nature of sainthood died quietly of spoiled fish, and his relics vanished. A wildling chief who boasted of blowing a horn that woke giants did not live long enough to do it again. A captain of the Night's Watch wrote in his journal of a delegation from the west, cloaked in crimson and fur, who paid very handsomely for some old bones and a bit of horn, found in an ancient barrow near the fist of the first men. Pieces moved. Gold flowed. Objects changed hands, some with ceremony, others with blood. Tywin did not personally oversee every acquisition. He did not need to. He simply wore the diadem in his solar at night and listened to the tremors in the weave of lies. When a merchant swore he had seen a blade that cut through armor like cloth, Tywin heard the tremor that meant truth. when a magister and Pentos cackled about a glass candle that spoke in a dead language. Tywin felt the faint sting as the listening rod woke in its sleep and turned, slightly, toward that place. The more artifacts came to Casterly Rock, the louder the rod hummed. Jaime felt it first on a visit home, years later, when he walked the old mining tunnels in his cups, handsome and hollow in his Kingsguard whites. He had not meant to go so deep. He followed a warm draft that smelled of a forge, thinking vaguely of childhood adventures, and found himself before a pale stone door with a lion's head and crystal eyes. "I don't remember this," he muttered. The lion's eyes were dark. The door stayed closed beneath his hand. He laughed and turned away, the sound too sharp in the narrow passage. For all his jokes about ghosts and golden lions and the crypts, some part of him was relieved when he found the stair back up. Cersei had never seen the door. She did not yet know that there was such a thing as a room her father would not allow her to enter. Her power ran in different channels, through smiles and touches, through the Stockton wine she shared with Robert when he came west to hunt, through the ways she studied men's weaknesses and learned the weight of their hungers. Tyrion discovered the truth of the vault by accident. It was years after the war, after Joffrey was born, after Robert's visits had become more perfunctory and more sodden, after Cersei's bitter contempt had hardened into a permanent smile. Tywin had called Tyrion back from whatever whorehouse or tavern he'd been occupying at the time, under the pretense of discussing trade in Lannisport. Tyrion had arrived late, drunk and flippant. The argument that followed had been savage, all icy scorn and flung barbs. "Is there any part of our house you haven't turned into a ledger?" Tyrion had snarled at last. "Even the crypts, father? Do the old kings pay in ghosts and dust?" "Nay, better dust than what you spend your coin on," Tywin snapped. "I have wasted enough breath on you today. Get out." Tyrion staggered from the study in a fury that burned through the wine's haze. He had no destination in mind, only movement. Walking usually steadied his thoughts, and the rock's tunnels felt safer than its occupied halls. Stone did not judge. Stone remembered, but it did not care. He walked downward, following the faint roar of the sea. The draft grew colder. His torch sputtered, then steadied. He realized with a flicker of surprise that he had gone lower than he ever had before. The walls narrowed, rough-hewn, the floor slick with mineral sheen. This far down, even the tunnels felt old, as if the stone had been moved grudgingly. He almost walked past the pale door. He saw only the glimmer of something smooth out of the corner of his eye. When he turned, the torchlight caught on the lion's carved mane, the crystal eyes. Tyrion stopped. "Well," he said softly, "and who are you?" The lion, unsurprisingly, did not answer. The door had no obvious hinges, no handle, no lock. Tyrion studied it, tracing the carved sigils with his eyes. They made no sense to him, but he recognized pattern when he saw it. Whoever had carved this had not done so for beauty alone. "Secrets under the rock," Tyrion murmured. "How like father." He reached out impulsively and pressed his palm to the lion's muzzle. For a moment, nothing. Then the crystal eyes brightened, the lines of the door flaring with dull gold. Tyrion snatched his hand back, heart leaping into his throat. "Seven hells," he whispered. The door shuddered and opened inward. Inside, the chamber glowed with the torch's light as if it had been waiting. The gold circlet, the sheathed blade, the bone rod, the 3 dragon eggs, brought from Korth, lay upon a low pedestal to one side now, nestled in iron claws that rose like roots from the stone floor. Tyrion's breath left him in a soft, unsteady laugh. "Oh, father," he said, "you have been busy." He stepped inside. The air felt strange. It tasted faintly of ash and salt and something metallic, as if a storm had just passed. The artifacts seemed to watch him, though none had eyes. Tyrion approached the dragon eggs first, drawn by morbid curiosity. He had seen dragon skulls above, their hollow sockets big enough for a man to stand in. These were smaller than his torso, but heavy-looking, dense. He laid a hand on the black egg. Cold. Deep cold. But beneath it, yes, a thrum, a rhythm, slow, slow, like a heartbeat in winter. "Dragons," Tyrion whispered. "The Targaryens lost their last wretched, stunted little beasts, and here father has eggs under his bed like hens." He imagined briefly his father striding into the throne room with a dragon at his heel. The image was ridiculous and oddly satisfying. On impulse, he picked up the bone rod. It felt wrong. Not in a painful way, but like holding something that was meant to be part of a larger body. The bronze bands were cool under his fingers. The faint sigils along its length seemed to twist when he looked at them directly. He lifted it. Sound rushed over him. Not the roar of the sea, nor the muted thump of waves through rock, nor the distant clank of chains from the mines. This was thinner, sharper. Whispers. Not of men and women, but of things. The eggs murmured. Not in words. In hunger. In memory of fire. The dragon skulls above, lined in a row like trophies, shifted faintly in their stone brackets. Tyrion heard the wall, far to the north, hum with old cold power. He heard a dull, deep note from the dark, drowned city of Valyria. He heard the thin whistle of something frozen and angry beyond the end of the world. He heard, impossibly, a small, keen cry from somewhere far across the narrow sea, where a girl with silver hair dreamed of dragons in a cold, foreign palace. The rod vibrated in his hands. Tyrion dropped it. It struck the stone with a crack that echoed in his bones. He swore viciously, rubbing his palms. His heart hammered. Well, he managed after a moment. That's one way to sober up. He looked at the circlet and the sheathed blade, and for once felt no urge to touch a new toy. When he left the chamber, the door sealed silently behind him. The crystal eyes dimmed. Tywin was waiting in his solar when Tyrion burst in. Hair disheveled, torch soot streaked on his face. Two guards straightened, but Tywin held up a hand. "Leave us," he said. They obeyed. They were not alone. Qyburn stood in the corner, hands folded, his expression unreadable. "You might have told me," Tyrion said, the words spilling over themselves, "that you would ignore my order to stay away from the lower tunnels." Tywin said, "I assumed as much." Tyrion blinked. I go." "You are predictable in your disobedience," Tywin said, with the sort of cold certainty most men reserved for weather. "Sit." Tyrion stayed standing out of sheer stubbornness. His legs wobbled. He sat. "You have seen our true vault," Tywin said. "You have touched what you were not meant to touch. Then you should not leave it hidden behind a door that opens to any Lannister hand." Tyrion snapped. "Did you think only perfect Golden Sons would find it? Or did you forget I am still your blood, no matter how much you pretend otherwise?" The diadem lay on the desk between them, the lion-biting ring of gold. Now that he knew its nature, Tyrion could not help staring at it. How many lies had it heard? How many truths had it forced his father to swallow? "I did not forget," Tywin said. "I chose not to waste words. If you had never gone down, you would have remained what you are now. A sharp-tongued fool squandering his wits on wine and whores. But you did go. You disobeyed. You listened. Now." Tyrion swallowed. He thought of the rods humming in his hands, of the far-off keening and the cold anger beyond the wall. "What is all that?" he asked, despite himself. "The world without its lies," Tywin said. "Qyburn calls it the weave. The lines of power that bind artifacts and old places together. It is waking, Tyrion. Magic is not dead. It is merely forgetful. We are reminding it who we are. Men... Kai." Qyburn's eyes gleamed. The listening rod was carved from the bones of something that swam in black waters before men walked upright, he said softly. "It remembers how to hear. The more such things we gather, the clearer the weave becomes. Already we can sense when others use it. A glass candle lit in Old Town. a priest in Volantis calling shadows, an old wildling blowing a horn that shakes stones loose. We are not the only ones searching. There are always others, Tywin said. Pretenders, dreamers, fools. They believe that having such things makes them kings. He leaned forward and the lamplight carved harsh planes into his face. They are wrong. The artifacts are crowns with no heads. They require someone who understands rule. And you, Tyrion said slowly. Believe that's you. Tywin did not blink. The Targaryens squandered the greatest weapon the world has ever known on incest and poems. The Starks waste theirs on stubborn pride and winter stories. The Faith drowns old powers in dogma. The Citadel smothers them under chains. Only one house has both the ruthlessness and the patience to gather the pieces and use them properly. Mandan. House Lannister, Tyrion said. House Lannister, Tywin agreed. Tyrion stared at him. You would make us kings in truth, even if we never wear the crown. The crown sits on a chair of swords that cuts every man who rests upon it, Tywin said. Let Robert bleed. Let any who follow him bleed. The true power is the hand that puts the chair where it wishes, and the things that whisper to it. And how many debts will we owe? Tyrion asked quietly. To dragon eggs and dead bones? Debts can be paid, Tywin said. Or shifted. That is what we do. Qyburn was watching Tyrion with a bright, expectant gaze. You could be useful, he said. The rod responds to you. Tyrion remembered the feeling of the world's whispers, the strange, terrifying clarity. Because I'm a Lannister? He asked. Because you are attuned, Qyburn said. And here no one thinks to silence hears much. Your mind is open where others are shut. You see what people pretend not to see. I suspect the artifacts recognize that in some forgotten way. His smile widened, thin and unsettling. And of course, there is your blood. Tywin rose, abruptly, the chair's legs scraping stone. If you must drink yourself into stupor, he said. Do it after you have done something with the wits the gods cursed you with. Qyburn will show you how to listen without losing yourself. You assume I want to help you, Tyrion said. Tywin's gaze was unblinking. I assume that, when faced with the choice between being a drunk fool whose house holds the keys to the world, and a Lannister who helps turn those keys, you will not choose to continue barking for other men's amusement. He left the Solar with the same controlled stride he used in council and in war. The door shut. Tyrion looked at Qyburn. Qyburn looked back. Serene as a cat offered cream. The things we could do, Qyburn said softly. The things we must guard against. If the wrong hands gather enough of these threads, the weave could be knotted into a noose. Better it be held in a golden hand than a bloody one, wouldn't you say? Nay. Tyrion thought of the lies he had heard, a sordid tapestry of greed and fear and petty malice. He thought of his father's unyielding face, of Cersei's hunger, of Jaime's squandered heroism. He thought, too, of the girl far away dreaming of dragons, and the cold rage in the ice beyond the wall. I think, he said slowly, that if we are to hold that hand, I had better make sure it does not strangle us in our sleep. Qyburn smiled. Then we are allies. Tyrion doubted that, but he did not say so. He went back down to the vault that night, sober, and picked up the listening rod with both hands. The weave greeted him like cold water. Time moved. Kings died. Children grew. Robert Baratheon proved as ill-fitted to rule as Tywin had suspected. His reign became a long, drunken tour through Westeros hunting grounds and brothels, punctuated by feasts and debts. Tywin, as hand, tightened the purse strings where he could, loosened them where necessary, and quietly ensured that many of those debts ran back to the Rock. Cersei watched and seethed and plotted, turning their son into a weapon sharp enough to cut even those who wielded him. In the north, Ned Stark brooded over honor and snows. In the east, a girl who should have been a queen was sold like chattel to a horse lord. In the frozen wastes beyond the wall, Pale blue eyes opened in darkness, very slowly. The Lannisters listened. Tyrion learned to walk the weave like a man stepping carefully across a frozen river, testing each patch for thinness. He lay in the vault among dragon skulls and whispered to them, half in jest, half in wonder, and felt the faint echo from the eggs in their cradle. He listened to the glass candle in Old Town when one night it flared to life for the first time in centuries beneath the hands of a chainmaester with ambitions larger than his order. He flinched when the horn in the far north was blown again, its note harsh and wild, and felt the walls shudder in old annoyance. Each time, he marked the tug on the weave, the way threads shifted. "We are not alone in this," he told Tywin once. "We never were," Tywin replied. "That is why we must be first." Tyrion learned with a sour growing respect what his father had built. There were agents in Old Town, ostensibly there to protect Lannister trade, but in truth tasked with watching the Citadel's forbidden shelves. There were Lannister men in white cloaks on the wall, bearing no lion badge but loyal to gold. There were contracts with Carthene moneymen and Volantene magisters, their ink drying on clauses about artifacts and curiosities that looked like madness to anyone not privy to the weave. And slowly, the vault filled. Heartsbane came first, sent for safekeeping, when Lord Randall Tarley's paranoia about Reach politics led him to make a deal with Tywin in exchange for gold and a marriage promise for one of his children. The great Valyrian blade hung on the wall, sullen and cold, its ripples dark as deep water. Oathkeeper and Widow's wail, new forged from ice, joined it later, heavier with history, their edges whispering of broken oaths in the north. The cat's paw dagger that would, in another turn of fate, have been used on a crippled boy in Winterfell ended up in Cersei's jeweled hand instead. She turned it this way and that in the light, smiling faintly at its balance. "It suits you," Tyrion said dryly when he saw it. "Sharp, small, and underestimated?" she replied. "How kind, little brother." "There are older things than blades," Qyburn murmured, when alone with Tyrion. His experiments in King's Landing's black cells had given him a grim familiarity with the line between life and death. Bones that remember being alive, stones that remember fire, charms carved into the foundations of castles. A man could rule much with such things if he knew which stones to press. "No, Khaleesi." "A man? Perhaps," Tyrion said. "A house, certainly. A realm?" He thought of the weave, of all the threads knotted under Lannister fingers. "A world? Why not?" Qyburn said. The weave grew tauter. Some things could not be diverted completely. Chance, pride, and prophecy all had their own momentum. Jon Arryn still died. Robert still rode north to offer his old friend the handship. Ned Stark still came south with his daughters, and with him came the past. Secrets buried in Winterfell's crypts, the truth of a dead prince and a stolen heir. Cersei and Jaime still tangled in their old dangerous folly. Bran Stark still climbed a tower he should not have climbed. But when he fell, he did not die. He lay in his bed in Winterfell, trapped in a silent body, eyes staring at the ceiling. At his bedside, a strange man with mismatched eyes whispered promises to a weirwood's heart, and somewhere between the wood's slow mind and the listening rod's hungry awareness, a new thread wove itself. Beyond the wall, in the cold black forests, something stirred. The horn was blown again. Once, twice. On the third blast, the weave screamed in Tyrion's bones. He tasted snow and old fear. The wall did not simply shudder. It cried out. Tyrion jerked awake in the vault, the listening rod clutched so tightly his knuckles were white. "Father," he panted, as he burst into the solar, hair wild. "The north." "I felt it," Tywin said. He sat at his desk, the diadem on the wood before him, a map of Westeros spread beneath his hands. His face was very calm. That meant he was furious. The wildlings have done something extraordinarily stupid. "They woke them," Tyrion said. He could still hear the echo of the horn in his skull. Whatever sleeps beyond the wall. We've been hearing their whispers for years. Now they're singing. Songs of ice, yes, Tywin said. Songs we must not let reach our halls. Tyrion stared at the map. The north was a pale expanse above the neck, sparsely dotted with names. The wall was a long black slash. Beyond it, the paper was mostly blank. In truth, it was more crowded than most men would ever know. Old things, new hatreds, eyes in every snowflake. We could warn them, Tyrion said. Prepare. Arm them with dragonglass and Valyrian steel. Put a lion's mane on the wall and let it roar for all the realms. Tywin's eyes flicked to him. We could. But if we do, they will sing songs of Stark and Mormont and Tarly. Not of us. They will forget who paid for the blades, who brought them knowledge. They will forget their debts. Men always do when the dead fall and the fires die. Better songs than silence, Tyrion snapped. Better a realm that lives ungrateful than one that dies owing everything. Tywin regarded him for a long moment. You grow soft, spending so much time listening to ghosts. I grow tired, Tyrion shot back, of carefully placing every piece just so, only to have the board swept from the table by things that do not care for our games. Then we will teach them to care, Tywin said. The others, the wildlings, the Starks, all of them. We have the horn they seek. They blew one. We have another. We can negotiate from strength. Me. Tyrion stared. Negotiate. With walking corpses and blue-eyed nightmares. Everything that thinks can be bargained with, Tywin said. If we cannot appeal to its fear or its greed, we appeal to its purpose. What do the others want? To kill, Tyrion said. To win, Tywin corrected. To reclaim something. To reverse some ancient theft. Qyburn believes. I believe, Qyburn said, stepping out from the shadows where he had waited as patiently as any servant, that they remember a world where ice ruled and warmth was a trespass. When the first men and the children struck their desperate bargain, they cheated the cold. It has taken a long while for it to gather its wits, but it is not mindless, my lord. Nothing that leaves patterns like those in the weave is wholly without reason. You would sit at table with a White Walker, Tyrion said, and ask it what it wants for peace? For terms, Qyburn said calmly. Peace is an illusion. There are only terms. Tywin rolled a small, carved lion between his fingers, its wooden mane worn smooth. We will not offer them Westeros, he said. We will not allow them to roll over our lands unopposed, but we may direct them toward those who do not understand the debt they owe us, toward those who think themselves beyond our reach. You would turn them south upon our enemies, Tyrion whispered. You would loose winter like a hunting hound, father. Tywin's gaze did not waver. If winter is coming regardless, it is a poor lord who stands aside and hopes his walls hold. A wise lord opens gates where he chooses and lets his enemies freeze first. Tyrion felt for a moment as if the floor had tilted, sending parchments and pieces sliding towards some invisible edge. He thought of Stark, stoic and stubborn, watching the white woods. He thought of southern lords snoring over their wine cups. He thought of all the artifacts in the vault beneath his feet, blades and horns and stones and eggs, and the listening rod vibrating more strongly each day. We are stretching the weave, he said, tugging it into patterns it was not meant to hold. Meant by whom? Tywin asked. By the gods? By old ghosts? By men with less imagination? The world does not care who rules it. Only the ruled care. And they matter only insofar as they obey. What if it breaks? Tyrion asked quietly. What if the weave snaps? Qyburn's eyes gleamed. Then we will be at the center, he said. And in a broken world, the center is the only thing that matters. Tyrion did not sleep that night. When dawn tinted the sky over the sunset sea, he descended once more into the vault and stood before the dragon eggs. They lay there, as they always had, silent. The rod hummed nearby. Heartsbane glowed faintly in the half-light. The cat's paw dagger gleamed. He thought of the girl across the sea, the one whose dreams he had heard once when the weave had surged. Daenerys. She had been a child then, frightened and alone. Now she was a woman, if the snatches of rumor filtering through the weave were true. She had married. She had lost. And 3 eggs, not unlike these, had cracked open in her hands and spilled dragons into the world for the first time in a century. So, they were not the only ones with fire. "Are we too late?" Tyrion asked the skulls. They did not answer. Of course they didn't. He was becoming foolish, talking to dead bones like some wildling witch. But the listening rod did stir, ever so slightly, leaning toward the east as if a breeze had touched it. "Fine," Tyrion said. "We will not be the only dragons, but we can be the ones who hold the reins." He picked up the rod. It pulsed with the rhythm of wing beats now, faint but growing. "Fly then," he murmured. "We will see who whistles loudest when you come." The struggle that followed would have happened one way or another. The Game of Thrones, the Dance of Dragons, the long night over the wall. In the story the bards know, it was a clash of kings and queens, of wolves and lions, of dead and living, of prophecy and stubborn, desperate human will. In the story the world itself felt, invisible and vibrating in its bones. It was a war of artifacts. Dragonbinder never reached Euron Greyjoy's hands. The Ironborn raider who would have taken it from the smoking ruins of Valyria instead found a sleek Lannister ship waiting for him in a narrow strait, its captain smiling with too many teeth and offering alliance in gold. The horn ended up in Casterly Rock, its spirals dark and heavy, its node untested. When Daenerys Targaryen's dragons grew large enough to darken skies above Meereen, the weave hummed like a plucked bowstring. The eggs under the rock warmed in sympathy. Qyburn, standing between skulls, laughed in quiet delight. "They are siblings," he said, "separated at birth. They call to one another. Nay. We will call louder," Tywin said. He had aged. His hair was more silver than gold now, his shoulders a little bowed, but his eyes were as hard as ever. The diadem had left faint, permanent grooves upon his brow where it rested each night. Invisible when he walked among courtiers, but clear in the weave, where his presence was a hot, golden knot. "How?" Tyrion asked. "We cannot travel to Slaver's Bay. We cannot seize her dragons with our hands." "We do not need to," Tywin said. "We have the horn." Qyburn stroked a spiraled artifact. "The Valyrians bred dragons with magic and whips," he said. "This horn was said to bind wing to rider. It was made in blood and fire and thus belongs to both. If the weave is tight enough, its note could travel across the world. It might not command at first, but it would be heard." "And if it cracks?" Tyrion asked. "If its note breaks the dragon's minds? Then we will have 3 fewer concerns," Tywin said. "Either we gain dragons or we remove them from the board. Both outcomes suit us." Tyrion closed his eyes briefly. Somewhere, in a hot, dusty city ringed by pyramids, a young queen who had burned her chains away sat upon a throne of her own and dreamed of returning home with fire. He had listened to her once through the weave when she had walked into the pyre. He had felt a fierce, pure thread of will that rivaled any Lannisters. "Blow the horn," Tywin said. Qyburn raised it to his lips. The sound that burst forth was not merely heard. It was felt. A tearing pressure behind the eyes, in the joints, along the teeth. It was as if someone had taken the world's oldest stone and scratched it across slate. The skulls in the vault vibrated. The dragon eggs bled faint smoke. Heartsbane sank an additional inch into its scabbard as if resisting. The lion's diadem flared. In Meereen, Drogon wheeled in sudden pain, shrieking, his fire scoring black lines across the sky. Daenerys staggered, clutching her head, hearing, for a moment, a roar that was not his. In the north, a young man called Jon Snow looked up from the wall and thought he saw a dark shadow against the aurora. Too far and too strange to be a bird. Beyond the wall, the others paused. Their smooth, ice-carved faces lifted. The notes scratched along their ancient nerves, like a remembered insult. The horn cracked. It split along its length. A jagged fissure, and a smell of scorched bone filled the vault. Qyburn lowered it, eyes watering, lips bloody. The crack glowed faintly with heat, then cooled. "Well," Tyrion said hoarsely. "Now we know what it does." Tywin's face was unreadable. "Did they hear?" he asked. "Oh yes," Qyburn said softly. "They heard, all of them." The weave trembled for days afterward, as if the world itself had a lingering ring in its ears. Dragons were restless. The others moved faster. Old wards flickered. Men and women across Westeros woke from dreams of horns and fire and ice, sweating. "Our enemies," Tyrion said, "know we exist now. Not just as a house with gold and soldiers, as something else. Something that meddles with strings they took for granted. The girl in Meereen will feel around her neck. The things in the north will bare their teeth." "Let them," Tywin said. "A lion does not whisper in the grass forever. There comes a time to roar." And roar they did. When Robert died in his hunting accident, the shock that ran through the weave was almost pleasant. A great, lumbering thread cut, leaving a vacuum. Joffrey ascended, cruel and unsteady. Cersei wrapped herself around the throne like a golden vine, swearing to defend their children's birthright with tooth and nail. Ned Stark lost his head on the steps of the Great Sept, and the realm bled in earnest. War blossomed, red and bright, in every corner. The Lannisters were everywhere in it, not only with armies and coin, though Tyrion commanded in the field, and Jaime rode with the vanguard, and Cersei played her deadly games in the capital. They were present in subtler ways. When Robb Stark won his first victories, some of his foes swore their swords shattered oddly, as if striking invisible stone. When Renly Baratheon died in his tent, the shadow that killed him was not wholly of Stannis making. There was a slight tug, a guiding hand that nudged it. When the wildfire bloomed beneath Blackwater Bay, the alchemist's jars had been whispered to. Soothed and stoked by Qyburn's careful work with old Valyrian formulas, and newer insights gleaned from the listening rod. The weave sang. It did not, however, obey perfectly. Robb Stark slipped through their fingers, winning where he should have lost. Daenerys, across the sea, freed cities and grew stronger. Jon Snow, very much not the bastard he thought he was, walked among the dead and came back changed, dragging with him a sense of purpose that made the weave shiver. "You cannot control everything," Tyrion told his father once, when the campaigns in the Riverlands had turned into a slog of mud and blood. "There are other players too stubborn to die exactly when convenient." Tywin's jaw clenched. "Then we make their deaths more inconvenient," he said. "The North can be broken with a marriage. The dragons can be lured or shattered. The dead can be bought with better terms." "Better terms for whom?" Tyrion demanded. "For us? What about everyone else?" Tywin's stare burned. "You are a lion," he said. "You are not everyone else. Remember that, or be eaten with them." In the end, it was neither dragon nor others nor stubborn Stark who felled Tywin Lannister. It was a crossbow bolt in a privy, shot by the sun he had tried so long to shape and could never quite see clearly. As Tywin's life poured out of him onto cold tiles, the weave shuddered. The diadem, locked away in a hidden drawer in his solar at the Rock, flared once and then dimmed. The rod hummed, disoriented. The artifacts in the vault drank in the sudden vacuum of will and patience. Cersei stepped into the space he left with ferocious hunger. Tyrion fled across the sea, a hunted man carrying the weight of a broken father and a half-finished design. Jaime drifted, maimed and uncertain. The carefully woven Lannister conspiracy seemed for a moment to fray. Yet the artifacts remained. They did not care about the deaths of men. Cersei did not know how to listen to the weave. She did not have Tyrion's mind for patterns nor Tywin's patience. She had only fury, and a savage sense of entitlement. But she had Qyburn, who had no scruples and an intimate understanding of how to use what remained. Under Queen Cersei, the Lannister grasp on magic grew. Raw. She wore the diadem openly in her private chambers, pacing before the window that overlooked the Blackwater. The palace staff believed it a new crown made for her vanity. They did not see the blood that sometimes trickled from her hairline at night, nor the way she flinched when she heard, for the first time, the full force of the realm's lies. "They all hate me," she whispered once, fingers digging into the stone sill. "They whisper that I am mad, that I am my father's shadow, that I killed my son." "They fear you," Qyburn said, standing just behind her shoulder. "That is almost as useful." "They plot," she said. "They whine. They sing songs of that dragon slut sailing west. They cheer the crippled Stark boy in his wagon. They kneel to my face and spit behind my back. I hear it all." Then you know where to cut," Qyburn said. "Words are threads. Pull enough, and the cloth tears." He showed her the listening rod. She held it like a scepter, unsteady at first, then with growing confidence. Through it, she felt the dragon's approach, 3 blazing knots moving across the sea. She felt the wall crack when the Night King, no convenient name attached to him in the weave, only a cold, precise intention, raised his hands and turned the dead against the living. She felt the old, groaning stones of Winterfell waking to their own memories as the Starks prepared for siege. "So many thrones," Cersei murmured. "So many chairs men fight over, north and south, east and west. They think their petty seats matter. They forget who sits beneath the rock." "You need not sit upon every throne," Qyburn said. "You need only be the pivot they turn upon." Cersei smiled. When Daenerys arrived at Dragonstone, when Jon Snow bent the knee in the south after arguments and long, heated conversations about the greater enemy, when alliances shifted like sand the weave tangle, there were too many wills now, too many artifacts in motion. The cat's paw dagger changed hands. Valyrian blades clashed. Dragons screamed above walls, ancient and new. At the Battle of Winterfell, when the dead came in their millions, the weave drew tight as a bowstring. Cersei was not there. She sat in King's Landing, diadem on her brow, listening rod in hand, surrounded by wildfire jars cleverly hidden in cellars and under streets. Her pregnancy was visible now, a curve beneath her gown, another precious golden life she intended to raise above all others. "What is happening?" she demanded. Qyburn's eyes were closed, his mind half in the vault. "They stand together," he murmured. "Wolves, dragons, men of the Night's Watch, red priests, a crippled boy in a god's wood. Even the hound fights. The weave is crowded. And the dead?" Cersei pressed. "Pressing," Qyburn said. "Millions of small cold threads, and one, bright cold, like a shard of mirror." His brow furrowed. "He is not like the rest. He remembers the last time this happened. He remembers losing. He does not intend to lose again." "Good," Cersei said. "Let him tire them. Let him shatter the north. Let the Dragon Queen burn herself out fighting shadows. When the snow melts, we will sweep the rest away." Qyburn hesitated. "If they lose, they will not lose completely," Cersei said. "I have seen them in my dreams. The crippled boy with the bird's eyes, the bastard who isn't one, the silver-haired girl with fire in her veins. They are too stubborn to die so easily. The gods love to torture such people." "Nay. And if the dead win?" Qyburn asked softly. Cersei's hand tightened on the rod. "Then we will bargain," she said. "As my father intended. We have their horn. We have their stories. We have a great deal of wildfire." She did not know, could not know, that far to the north, when the Night King closed his hand around Bran Stark's throat in the Godswood. The weave twisted. The cat's paw dagger flashed in Arya's hand, its Valyrian edge meeting ancient ice. The weave screamed as a thread older than kingdoms snapped. The Night King shattered. The dead fell. The weave, for a heartbeat, went slack. In that slackness, everything flailed. Dragons roared. Men laughed and wept. The wall groaned, its old purpose half complete, half denied. Magic, forced into tight channels for years, surged outward suddenly, like water freed by a broken dam. It crashed against Casterly Rock. In the vault, the artifacts vibrated dangerously. The eggs rattled. Heartsbane leaped in its mount. The listening rod bent like a bow. The pale stone of the lion door cracked hairline fractures. In King's Landing, Cersei staggered, clutching her head. "What is it?" she gasped. "The debt," Qyburn whispered. He had to shout to be heard over the roar, only they felt. "All the debts, your father, our house, has been borrowing and borrowing from the weave for years. Pushing it, twisting it. Now a great weight has been removed. The books are being balanced." The diadem bit deep into her flesh, drawing blood that ran down her cheeks like tears. She screamed, not entirely from pain. "Make it stop!" she shrieked. "You are the clever one, Qyburn. Make it stop." "We cannot stop it," Qyburn said. His eyes were very wide now. "We can only decide where it breaks." He ran to the map table, hands slapping down amidst the painted castles and gold lions and little carved stags. His fingers hovered over the model of King's Landing, then lifted, then went farther west to the small golden lion that marked Casterly Rock. "We can let the storm shatter the rock," he said. "Let it take the seat of our power. Spare the rest." Cersei stared at him. "Destroy the rock," she repeated blankly. "Or," Qyburn said, licking his lips, "we can anchor the breakage here, in the city, in the throne. The weave is tangled around that ugly chair worse than anywhere. If we make it the fulcrum, perhaps." He trailed off. "Perhaps? Perhaps what?" Cersei rasped. "Perhaps everything beyond Burns," Qyburn said. "The artifacts, the old bargains, the stranger things that crawl in shadows. Perhaps the magic that has plagued us for years will finally gutter out." "And us?" Cersei demanded. "What of us?" Qyburn hesitated. Cersei laughed then, a wet, bitter sound. "I am queen of the ashes already, by every fool's whisper," she said. "If we must burn to rid the world of these debts, then so be it. But the rock will not fall. My father's work will not be snuffed like a candle in a gust of cold wind. If there must be ruin, it will be here." She snatched up one of the small wildfire vials Qyburn had left near the map, holding it up so the green liquid shimmered. "Light them," she said. Qyburn stared. "Your Grace?" "Light every last one," Cersei said. "Beneath the sept, beneath the streets, beneath the Red Keep. If the weave wants a fulcrum, give it one. If the world wants a sacrifice, give it a city. But the rock stays. Our house stays." "Nani?" Qyburn bowed his head. "As you command," he said. In the vault beneath Casterly Rock, Tyrion felt the decision like a knife. He had returned, after long travels and bitter service to dragons, drawn home by a mixture of duty and desperation. He had stood in the vault, listening rod in hand when the Night King had died. He had felt the weave slacken, and had known instantly that something terrible and inevitable was coming. "My sister is going to destroy the city," he said aloud, to skulls and darkness. "Of course she is. Of course." He could feel her through the diadem and the rod and the old blood they shared. The choice she had made was exactly the one Tywin would have made, had he been as cornered and as furious. Gold before blood. House before realm. Power before pity. The weave surged. Tyrion had no illusions left. He knew better than anyone that he was no hero, no chosen one. He had killed his father, betrayed kings, lied, loved unwisely, drunk too much. He had done monstrous things and justified them with clever words. But he had also listened. He knew the weave in ways even Tywin had not. He knew how many threads ran through King's Landing. The throne, the sept, the Red Keep, the children playing in the streets, the rats in the walls. He knew how many ran through the rock, the old mines, the artifacts, the bones of Lann the Clever's first tricks. He knew how many lines stretched outward, to the dragons in the north, to the Starks who held winters in their blood, to the east where other powers watched. He knew what would happen if Cersei's plan succeeded. "You'll tear it," he whispered. "You'll snap the weave at the throne and send the ends lashing like whips. You'll burn magic out of the world and half the world with it. Perhaps that would be mercy. Perhaps a world without magic would be quieter, safer." But Tyrion thought of dragons in flight, of the way the weave had sung when the dead fell, of Bran's odd, distant gaze, of the way the north snows glittered like starlight. He thought of old wrongs that had never been righted, of chains that had been broken, of people who had glimpsed their own power because the weave had woken. "No, we are not the only ones who owe debts," he said. He grasped the listening rod with both hands and thrust it into the center of the vault. He spoke, not in any language of men, but in patterns. He thought of every lie he had heard, every truth, every bargain. He thought of Lann the Clever, tricking giants and kings. He thought of Tywin, bending men to his will without a single spell. He thought of Cersei, refusing to yield even as the world shifted beneath her. Of Jaime, still trying somehow to be a knight in a world that did not deserve the word. He thought of all the houses and names and thrones. He thought of how small they were. "Listen," he whispered to the artifacts, to the skulls, to the eggs. "Listen to me, just this once, you stubborn old relics. We have used you, twisted you, hoarded you. We have given nothing back. Time to pay." The weave bucked like a maddened horse. Tyrion drove the rod down. It pierced the stone floor as if it were soft earth. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the weave exploded. Not outward, not in the indiscriminate lashing Cersei had courted, but along carefully chosen lines. Tyrion had walked those threads for years. He knew where they frayed, where they knotted, where they held. The surge hit King's Landing first. The wildfire lit. Green fire roared through tunnels and cellars, engulfing rats and empty barrels, licking at foundations. It raced toward the Great Sept, toward the Red Keep, toward the Iron Throne itself. At the last moment, the weave twisted. The fire bent around the small folks' quarter like water parting around a stone. It poured instead into the Sept, into the Red Keep, into the throne room. The Iron Throne shrieked as centuries of collected pain and ambition turned to slag. The Red Keep's towers toppled inward. The Great Sept collapsed in a roar of shattered crystal. Cersei, sitting in her tower with the diadem on her brow, laughed even as the floor dropped out from under her. The diadem fused to her skull. The listening rod tore itself from her grasp and went screaming through the air as if drawn by a greater pull. The wildfire burned. And then, abruptly, it went out. Not over minutes, not as barrels emptied, but like a candle pinched between fingers. In the north, dragons circled over Winterfell, wings buffeted by a sudden warm gust that smelled of summer over fresh snow. The dead already lay in heaps, but the sense of looming, frozen malice receded further, as if something had slammed a door in its face. Bran Stark's eyes rolled white, then cleared. For the first time, the quiet in his head was not merely the silence of ravens. It was the silence of something old that had finally stopped whispering. The walls sighed. In Meereen, a glass candle guttered and went dark in a startled maester's hand. In Ashai, Shadowbinders looked up from their bowls of black blood and muttered to one another in uneasy voices. Their tricks still worked, but some distant hum was gone. In the haunted ruins of Valyria, the smoking sea stilled slightly, as if a great beast below had rolled over and gone back to sleep. In Casterly Rock, the vault cracked. The pale stone wall split from ceiling to floor. The lion door shattered, its crystal eyes bursting into sparks. The artifacts leaped from their stands. Heartsbane's blade turned to vapor in a single brilliant flash. The eggs fractured with soft, simultaneous sighs, their shells crumbling to fine, glittering dust. Only the rod remained, buried in the floor. Tyrion lay on his back amidst falling stone, ears ringing, lungs burning with dust. He coughed, then laughed weakly. "Always breaking things," he croaked. "First father, now the world." The weave was quiet, not dead. He could still feel faint threads, like the ghost of a song. Life had its own magic. Birth, love, hatred, hope. Those things wove themselves whether artifacts hummed or not. But the great, taut ropes that had bound dragons and others and old bones together were gone, or at least severed from the hands that had tried to use them as reins. He rolled onto his side, wincing. The vault had not collapsed entirely. The rock was old and stubborn. It would take more than this to bring it down. But the walls were cracked. The ceiling groaned. Dust drifted constantly. The dragon's skulls were gone. Only scorch marks remained where their great jaws had rested. Of the eggs, only shimmering dust that glittered like mica in the torchlight. Tyrion reached out, drew a line through it with one finger, and watched it swirl. "I'm sorry," he said, "to no one and everyone. We should have shared you, or left you alone." He stood, swaying. His leg hurt. His head felt stuffed with wool. But he was alive. He climbed, slowly, up out of the depths. When he emerged into the main hall of Casterly Rock, the servants stared at him as if a ghost had walked through their midst. Gray light streamed in through narrow windows. There was a faint smell of smoke, but no raging fire. "What news?" he demanded. A steward swallowed. "King's Landing, my lord," he stammered. "They say the Red Keep has fallen, the Great Sept too, but much of the city still stands. The people are fleeing north and south in droves. There are dragons in the sky, but they do not burn as much as they might. They seem aimless." Tyrion nodded slowly. He could imagine Daenerys circling above a ruined throne room, dragons restless under her commands. The weave no longer whispered in their ears. They still had fire, still had teeth, but something had been taken from them. The same something that had once domed dragon eggs over deserts and sung in Valyrian steel. "And the rock?" he asked. "Some cracks," the steward said. "Noise shaking, but we hold." Of course they did. Lannisters landed on their feet. That, more than any magic, was their true inheritance. "Send ravens," Tyrion said. "To Winterfell, to what remains of the capital, to every lord we still have any claim upon. Tell them the Lannisters will offer shelter, food, aid. We have grain. We have gold." The steward gaped. "Aid? Yes," Tyrion said wearily. "We will buy what we can no longer command. It is what we always did. We just forgot to be honest about it." As the man hurried off, still blinking, Tyrion walked slowly through the rock. He passed portraits of lions in gilt frames, Tydos with his soft smile, Tywin with his hard eyes. He paused before his father's image. "You almost did it," he said quietly. "You almost made us the true power behind all thrones. For a while we were. Every crown, every lord, every hero danced on strings we tied to old bones and older lies." He tilted his head. "And then the bill came due," he said. "As it always does." He smiled, faint and bitter. "Don't worry. We're still Lannisters. We still have debts to collect. We'll just have to do it the hard way now, with words, with coin, with the occasional well-timed betrayal." Outside, the sea crashed against the cliffs, steady and indifferent. The sun slid out from behind a cloud, lighting the golden lions on the banners. Far to the north, at Winterfell, a boy in a wheeled chair looked south, with eyes that saw more than men's wars. Far to the south in the broken city, A woman with silver hair walked amidst scorched stone, dragons pacing at her heels. Men knelt. Others refused. The thrones of the world, chairs of wood and stone and iron, high seats in halls, stools and smoky tents, would always exist. Men and women would always fight for them, justify their quests with gods and destiny and justice. They would always tell themselves they were meant to rule. Somewhere, in the deep quiet where the weave had once sung, something like laughter lingered. House Lannister had gained control of every magical artifact it could reach. It had bent the world's hidden lines to its will. For a time, it had indeed become the true power behind all thrones. In losing that power, in breaking it rather than letting it break everything else, it had done something no one, not even Tywin, would ever have expected. It had, in its own ruthless, graceless way, paid its debt. Tyrion poured himself a cup of wine and stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the restless sea. The horizon was streaked with gold and purple, clouds like torn banners scattered across it. Somewhere beyond that line, ships sailed, carrying refugees, soldiers, dreamers. Some would come west, to the Rock. Some would go north. Some would vanish. He raised his cup. To thrones, he said. May they always believe they are the point of it all. He drank. The sea roared. The Rock stood. The world turned, quieter now, but not empty. Men and women would fill the silence with their own songs. Not the songs of artifacts and ancient compacts, but the songs of their own stubborn, fragile lives. The lion's roar, once woven through the very bones of magic, faded to a more ordinary sound. Steel on steel in the yard, laughter in the kitchens, a child's squeal as she scampered through a sunlit hall. House Lannister remained, behind fewer thrones perhaps, but still, stubbornly there. The raven from the north came at dusk, wings ragged from long flight. Tyrion watched it circle once above the outer yard of Casterly Rock before a handler whistled it down. The bird landed heavily, claws scraping the steward's leather-clad wrist, eyes like polished bits of night. Around them, servants moved with that particular brittle briskness that followed disaster. They did not yet know whether the world had ended, only that something large had broken. The steward approached with the cylinder in his hands, breath steaming in the cooling air. From Winterfell, my Lord Tyrion. Lord. He had not claimed the title, not allowed, but with Cersei gone and what was left of their cousins either dead, missing, or clinging to lesser holdings, someone had to sign the letters. Open it, Tyrion said. The seal was a direwolf, pressed cleanly in dark gray wax. He expected Sansa's hand. He found Bran's. The script was small and careful, every letter formed with an almost eerie precision. There was no greeting, no polite inquiry after health. Just words. You pulled on the threads. Already, Tyrion felt a prickle at the back of his neck. You broke what could not be borne to keep breaking. That was well done. Tyrion read the line again. Well done was not praise exactly. It was more like the way a maester might mark a correct sum. His fingers tightened unconsciously on the parchment. But debts remain. There will be a council. We need you alive for it. Bring as much food as you can spare. And Jaime, Bran of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Three-Eyed Raven. A blot of ink had spread slightly beneath the last title, as if the quill had hesitated, or as if the hand that guided it had touched something only it could feel. Tyrion read it twice, then a third time. Jaime, he thought, and his heart jumped. Fear, hope, anticipation, all tangled. Has my brother answered my last raven? He asked sharply, looking up. The steward shifted uneasily. The scouts report he was seen near River Run, my lord. Riding alone. No banner. Nay. Of course, Tyrion muttered. Give a man back his hand and he immediately misplaces every sense he has. He folded the letter. Send word to every village and hold fast between here and the neck. We march on Winterfell in a fortnight. The steward's eyes widened. March, my lord? With wagons, Tyrion said. With grain, salt meat, wine, dried fish, hard cheese. With everything the rock can spare. And yes, with guards to keep the more inventive among our bannermen from snacking on the way. But Tyrion cut in. Our gold is useful only as long as there is a realm in which to spend it. Winterfell asks for aid. We will give it. Let the singers choke on the truth of it. The man bowed, dazed, and hurried away. Tyrion returned to his balcony for a moment, staring west where the sun bled into the sea. The horizon was a thin, bright line. You pulled on the threads, he murmured. Trust a boy who sees old to make it sound so simple. He thought of Bran in his wheeled chair, eyes gone milky white as ravens flowed through him. He thought of the moment the weave had snapped, and the strange, empty quiet that had followed. He wondered what that silence felt like to someone who had spent his adolescence with the song of the world in his ears. I am getting sentimental, he told the sea. Soon I will start adopting stray direwolves and giving speeches about honor. The waves did not argue. He summoned a cup of wine and drained it nearly dry, then went in search of Jaime. He found his brother in the western gallery, standing before one of the great windows that looked out over the ocean. The light behind him turned his hair to a molten halo, but the lines of his face were different now, shadows carved deeper at the eyes and mouth. His golden hand rested on the stone sill, fingers curled. You're supposed to be gallivanting through the Riverlands, redeeming the Kingslayer's honor, Tyrion said by way of announcement. Not lurking around my hall like a particularly handsome ghost. Jaime did not turn immediately. Where it travels, he said at last. About cities half burned and thrones melted. About wildfire that lit and then changed its mind. Sensible wildfire, Tyrion said. Perhaps we have exhausted the world's supply of madness. Jaime snorted. Unlikely. He glanced over his shoulder. Did you do it? Define it, Tyrion said. Set the city alight? No. That was Cersei. Stop it from killing 500,000 people whose worst crime is poor life choices? Yes. Break the world's toys so no one could play with them anymore. That would also be me. Jaime faced him fully then. One green eye, one pale. The scar a twisted white river down his cheek. And father's work? He asked quietly. You broke that too. Tyrion felt the question like a knife sliding between old ribs. Father's work was always going to break, he said. A house cannot stand forever on a foundation of other people's necks. I merely chose where the ruins fell. Jaime looked at him for a long while, then nodded once, slow. Good, he said. I'm tired of holding up the ceiling while other men dance on the table. There will be other ceilings, Tyrion said. Winterfell has called a council. They want us there, and they want you. Nay, me. Jaime's mouth twisted. To thank or to hang? Tyrion shrugged. I imagine that depends on how insulted they are feeling on any given day. Still, the invitation specifically requests that you be alive for it. A promising sign. Jaime huffed something that might almost have been a laugh. Winterfell, he said, turning back to the window. I once pushed a Stark boy from a tower there. And now he summons you to talk about the shape of the world, Tyrion said. If the gods have a sense of humor, it is a dark one. The gods, Jaime said, have always been bastards, which is why we are going, Tyrion said. To make sure the conversation is not left entirely to them. Winterfell rose from the snows like a beast crouched around an ember heart. Tyrion had seen it once before, long ago, when he had ridden north with the royal party, drunk and curious and largely dismissed. Then, its walls had seemed dependable but a little shabby, its towers solid, its people curious in their stiff northern fashion. Now, the stones bore new scars, patches of black where fires had scorched, sections of wall rebuilt with fresh-cut masonry, the odd organic warp where Bran's power had run through the foundations in the night of battle. The Godswood's branches were bare, crusted with frost, but the weirwood's face was wet with sap that gleamed almost red. The yard was crowded. Banners snapped in the thin, cold wind. The direwolf most prominent, but also the kraken, the flayed man, the merman, even the stag with a flaming heart. The dragon's 3 heads flew too, on a flag that drooped slightly, as if uncertain of its place. As the Lannister column rolled in, wagons groaning with food and furs, men in red and gold cloaks, they drew every eye. Tyrion rode at the head, cloaked in crimson trimmed with fur. Jaime at his side, golden hand catching the weak winter light. Behind them, a handful of Westerland's lords shifted in their saddles, unused to being the guests rather than the hosts. Sansa Stark came down the steps to meet them. She wore gray wool and white fur, her auburn hair braided in a northern style. But there was a faint gleam at her throat, a chain of dark links, each one a different metal. Not a maester's chain. This one was finer, more decorative, but Tyrion recognized the intent. Knowledge displayed, not hidden. "Lady Stark," Tyrion said, inclining his head. Frost crackled under his horse's hooves. "You grow more terrifyingly competent every time I see you." Her mouth tightened, that old familiar impulse to bristle at his jests, and then smoothed. "Lord Tyrion," she said. "Lord Jaime, welcome to Winterfell. Your aid is appreciated." It can me, Dandaka. "Food is always appreciated," Tyrion said. "It is the one form of politics everyone understands. We brought wine too. I find even northerners think more kindly with a cup in hand." "We drink," Sansa said. "We do not forget." "I would be disappointed if you did," Tyrion replied. Their eyes met. Once, she had been a frightened girl in silks, his unwilling bride, a pawn shuffled between monsters. Now, there was a steadiness in her that reminded him uncomfortably of her mother. She had learned to listen to the lies around her without needing a diadem. "Bran is waiting in the Great Hall," she said. "He insists on presiding, I would argue, but..." A faint, wry smile touched her mouth. "He sees things. It is difficult to win an argument with a boy who can describe your mistakes before you make them." "Believe me," Tyrion said, glancing briefly at Jaime. "I understand." They dismounted. The air inside Winterfell was almost warm by comparison, thick with the scent of smoke, fur, food, and too many people crammed into one space. The high tables had been rearranged in a circle rather than on the dais. There were no thrones, only chairs. Someone had made a point. Faces turned as they entered. Jon Snow, no Jon Targaryen now, if one cared for such details, stood near the fire. His hair was longer, tied back in a rough knot, streaked with silver at the temples that had not been there when last Tyrion saw him. The lines around his eyes were deeper. He still wore black, though with a gray cloak more stark than Night's Watch. Ghost lay at his feet, red eyes half-lidded, head resting between paws. Beside him stood Daenerys Targaryen. She had always carried herself like a woman on the edge of a storm. Now, that storm had passed, leaving something stranger. Her hair was shorter than the old tales described, not a waterfall of silver down her back, but a practical braid half hidden by furs. Her face was thinner, the lines around her mouth carved by grief and resolve. She wore no crown. 3 small scars, faintly pale, ran along her neck. Places where dragon teeth, once as hatchlings, had nipped her like pups. Her eyes, when they fell on Tyrion, were unreadable. Bran sat in a heavy oaken chair opposite the fire, his wheeled contraption behind him. The weirwood had marked him. There was a faint pattern in the skin of his temples, like roots beneath ice. His gaze was odd, both distant and focused, as if he were looking at them and beyond them simultaneously. Around the circle, others. Arya Stark with her quick stillness. Gendry Baratheon, newly legitimized and uncomfortable in good cloth. Davos Seaworth, lines of caution and humor etched deep. Gilly with her babe. Samwell Tarly clutching parchments. Brian of Tarth, tall and solid at Jaime's first sight, Yara Greyjoy. A shattered realm, gathered in one drafty hall. Tyrion stepped into the circle. "Shall I start with an apology," he said, "or a joke?" "No jokes," Sansa said. "Not yet." "I apologize then," Tyrion said lightly. "It seems I have helped break the world. Again." A few snorts around the room, mostly silence. Bran lifted his gaze. When it met Tyrion's, Tyrion felt an odd sensation, as if someone were leafing through a book whose pages he was standing on. "You ended a story whose ending would have killed us all," Bran said. His voice was calm, with that faint, distant echo that never quite left. "You also murdered your father, betrayed a queen, and drank enough wine to drown a small town. I suppose we cannot choose which parts of us the Ravens remember," Tyrion murmured. "No," Bran said. "We cannot." He looked to the others. "We are here because the world is quieter than it was 3 months ago. The dead that walked are gone. The fire that grew in dragons burns less hot. The wall has stopped singing. The weave is dim. We all feel it, those of us who ever touched such things at least." Davos shifted. "I can't say I miss magic," he said. "Every time I saw it, someone caught fire, usually on purpose. Me. Magic is only a tool," Daenerys said, her voice low but carrying. "Like a sword. It depends on who wields it." "Even swords break," Arya said. Her hand rested lightly on the hilt of a thin blade at her hip. "Even Valyrian steel. The dead prove that, and we still found ways to kill them." "Tools break," Bran said. "Stories do not. They change. The story of this realm has been bound up with old powers for thousands of years. Children of the forest, first men, the pact, the long night, the dragon's rise, their fall, the Targaryens, the rebellion, the wars. All of it woven together. All of it tugged in recent years by one house more than any other." His gaze returned to Tyrion. "You asked what would happen if House Lannister gathered every magical artifact it could," he said. "You did not always know you were asking. Your grandfather thought in coin and steel, but he opened that door and you walked through it." Murmurs rustled around the circle. "Is this a trial then?" Tyrion asked. "Because if so, I should have brought better wine." "It is an accounting," Bran said. "Off debts. A Lannister always pays his," Tyrion said automatically. "Yes," Bran said. "Sometimes by choice, sometimes not." Daenerys spoke, finally. "Tell us," she said, eyes fixed on Tyrion. "Tell us what you did beneath your rock." Tyrion met her gaze. He had once pledged himself to her vision of a better world, then betrayed it. He had imagined, dimly, that he could perhaps avoid this conversation by hiding in the West. He should have known better. "We listened," he said simply. "We listened to the things that whisper when men sleep. To horns, to blades, to stones that remember fire. We listened to dragons that were not yet born. We listened to the dead before they walked. We listened so hard we forgot that listening itself is a choice." "Obey." "And when you heard?" Jon asked quietly. "We moved pieces," Tyrion said. "We nudged kings into madness and rebellions into the right shape. We stole horns and eggs and bones. We blew a sound once that nearly broke your dragon's mind across the sea." Daenerys' jaw tightened. "And at the end," Tyrion went on, "when all those threads were pulled so tight they might snap, my sister tried to use that tension to burn the board. I chose to cut them instead." "Why?" Arya asked. "You could have kept them. Kept magic. Kept dragons and horns and whatever else." Tyrion thought of the vault, of the shimmering weave, of the way the world felt now, muted but somehow clearer. "Because the world is not safe in a few hands," he said. "Not even when those hands belong to people I love. Especially not then. We had become addicted. My father, my sister, Keeber, and myself. We believed we were the only ones who could understand such things. We believed we were entitled to decide for everyone else. And perhaps we did, once or twice, prevent greater horrors. Perhaps without us, the others would have swept all before them, or dragons would have burned cities to ash. He nodded slightly toward Daenerys. But every time we altered the story, we made ourselves the heroes in our own minds. No one else consented. The Weave did not consent. It was not ours to own. You speak like a man who has spent too long in a library, Yara Greyjoy drawled. Or a sept. Or a vault, Tyrion said. One learns to think when one is not busy being killed. Rand's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of his chair. You paid one debt, he said. The largest. The world is no longer a tapestry pulled at from one side. But there are smaller ones. Houses broken. Cities burned. Lives bent around secrets no longer needed. And what? Gendry asked bluntly. Does that have to do with us? The magic's gone. Or mostly gone. We still have to eat. We still have to decide who sits where. Samwell cleared his throat. It's not entirely gone, he said, pushing up his spectacles. I've tested some of the effects. Dragonglass still leaves the dead properly dead. Valyrian steel still cuts well. The weirwood still. Here, if less loudly. But the amplifying structures, as it were. The artifacts that connected things over long distance. Those seem dead. No more glass candles. No more horns that shake mountains. No more weave. Meh. Isha. We are returning to an older world, Bran said. One where stories are carried by men and women and ravens and not by objects that remember too well. That means we decide the rest with words, with laws, with councils. You want to choose a king, Tyrion said. Bran tilted his head. I want to choose a shape, he said. King. Queen. Tasha. Council. It matters less than the story we tell about it. Me. Daenerys stepped forward. Her dragons were not here. They were hunting somewhere to the east, uncomfortable in cold northern skies. But the memory of their shadows moved with her. I have a claim, she said. By blood, by fire, by all that was taken from my family. And look how well blood and fire have served us, Sansa said coolly. Daenerys' gaze flicked to her. You would see the realm divided, north and south, free and bound, chaos. I would see the North never lose a king to someone else's madness again, Sansa said. We bled for your wars, for your dragons, for the dead. We have earned the right to chart our own winter. Perhaps, Tyrion said mildly, we could avoid starting another war in the hall where we just finished one. Jon had been silent till now, watching with that grave, troubled gaze that always made Tyrion feel as if he were being weighed against a scale of invisible honor. What do you suggest? He asked. Something radical, Tyrion said. We tried telling the truth. A ripple of amusement, disbelief, discomfort. House Lannister hoarded magic as we once hoarded gold, he said. We turned it into a ledger only we could read. The rest of you suffered the interest. That is on us, so we start by acknowledging it. Publicly. In song, in story, in law. Let the world know what we did. Let no clever lord in 100 years be able to say, ah, but perhaps there is a secret vault under my feet too. Perhaps I may do likewise. And what do you offer beyond apologies and stories? Sansa asked. Food, Tyrion said. Coin. Trade. Ships. The rock is intact. Lannisport is bruised, but afloat. King's Landing is not what it was. We can feed people while they rebuild. We can refurbish harbors. We can fund roads. All openly. All with ledgers every lord can read. Okay. You would buy forgiveness, Arya said. I would buy time, Tyrion countered. Forgiveness is a luxury. Survival is not. Davos shifted, rubbing his beard. Hey, he said. And a man who admits to his sins and offers to pay for them, well, it's better than a man who denies and expects thanks. There's another debt, Bran said quietly. Beyond gold, beyond food. Tyrion met his gaze. Magic, he said. Yes, Bran said. You ended something. You did not ask those of us bound to it whether we wished it ended. I thought you hated it, Tyrion said. You never chose to fall from that tower. You never chose to see through ravens and tree roots. Bran's mouth curved faintly. Hate is a word for men with fewer perspectives, he said. I saw more than most. It was lonely, loud. I would not wish it on others, but it was also beautiful and useful. I saw the past. I helped us in small ways. Now that is less. You took that from me. Tyrion swallowed. Would you have rather I let the world burn? He asked. No, Bran said simply. Their eyes held. Then tell me what you want, Tyrion said. Because if there is one thing I have learned, it is that trying to guess what a Stark wants usually ends in disaster. Bran glanced toward the weirwood beyond the walls, its pale face glimpsed through a high window. Stories, he said. As you said, written down. Not just of kings and battles, but of what was. Of magic as it truly was, not as maesters and septons will later pretend it never existed. You have seen more of the hidden side of the world than most. Sam has seen some. So have others. I want a place where those memories are kept. Weave of words, if you like. A book, Sam said, eyes lighting. Or many books. A library. Not in Old Town, Bran said. The Citadel would sit on such knowledge like a fat man on a pie and tell everyone else it was poisonous. Somewhere new, somewhere open. Somewhere cold, I suppose, Tyrion said wryly. Bran's brows rose a fraction. Do you object to having a reason to visit the north, Lord Tyrion? Only my toes object, Tyrion said. The rest of me quite likes not being murdered. It would be fitting, Jon said slowly, if the knowledge of what was kept alive here, where the first men walked, where the wall watches, where winter comes first. And what of rule? Daenerys pressed. We speak of books and food, but not of crowns. Bran looked at her. Do you still want one? He asked. The bluntness of the question seemed to startle even Daenerys. Her mouth opened, closed. For a moment, Tyrion thought he saw in her eyes the girl from the Dothraki Sea, the one who had stared into a funeral pyre and found herself on the other side with fire in her lungs. I wanted to break the wheel, she said, to end the spinning of thrones and wars and sons killing fathers, to build something better. And what stopped you? Sansa asked. Daenerys' jaw worked. Fire is an easy answer, she said. It would have been simple to fly over your walls and burn away those who defied me. The heat of my dragon sang in my blood. The weave whispered I could. Then it went quiet. The horn ceased. The old voices vanished. The temptation felt smaller. I saw clearly what burning you would mean. Not just an obstacle removed, but a people destroyed. A story ended. I did not burn you, Lady Stark. Not because I could not, but because I chose not to. How? Sansa held her gaze. Then, slowly, she nodded. Once, you still have dragons, Jon said. You still have a claim. If you want the throne, say it. Daenerys looked at him. Do you? She asked. I never did, he said. I barely wanted to be Lord Commander. I have worn too many crowns of snow and blood. I am tired. Many. You cannot simply walk away, Yara said. Not after all this. People will follow you whether you will it or no. Then they are fools, Jon replied. And I have had my fill of fools. Bran's fingers tapped again. We could choose you, he said. By acclamation. Not by blood. That would be a change. Jon shook his head. I'd end up like every other king, torn between wars and councils, pulled in directions I don't want. The North needs Sansa. The dragons need Daenerys. The Weirwood? He glanced at Bran. I suppose you can manage yourself. What of a council? Sam ventured. Not a regent council, but a permanent one. Representatives from each kingdom, or region, if we separate some. A king or queen chosen by them, not by birth. Someone who can be removed if they start hearing voices that aren't there. You want the lords to choose who rules them, Gendry said skeptically. They'll just choose themselves. Then make the council larger, Sam said. Include others, knights, septons, men from the cities, fishmongers and blacksmiths, Davos added. They're the ones who bleed most when kings get squeamish about their honor. The North will not be ruled from King's Landing, Sansa said firmly. Not again. We can send a voice. We will listen. But we will not kneel. Nor will Dorne, the Dornish envoy said lazily. We have never been fond of kneeling. Nor will the Iron Islands, Yara said. We'll lean, maybe. If the tide is right, Daenerys drew a breath. Tyrion watched her closely, seeing the old struggle in her. The dragon and the girl, the conqueror and the breaker of chains. I will not be queen of ashes, she said at last. Nor queen of a broken wheel with spokes pretending they are different. I will be part of this council. I will lend my dragons' names to treaties. I will see to rebuilding in the south. The freedmen of Meereen and elsewhere deserve more than to be forgotten. Let some of them come. Let some other lands, beyond Westeros, send voices. The world is larger than your wall, and your rock. And the throne? Sansa asked. The thing everyone keeps circling around and refusing to look at. Bran's gaze drifted to the high end of the hall where traditionally a raised dais might sit. It was empty save for a simple chair and a small table with bread and salt. The Iron Throne is gone, he said. Melted. Its swords returned to slag. Let that be the end of such seats. Build no new throne of blades. Let the king, if there must be one, sit in a chair he can get out of. Who, then? Arya asked. Silence. Eyes turned, almost reluctantly, to Bran. He smiled, a small, strange expression. I can see many things, he said, including what a poor king I would make in the old sense. I cannot ride. I cannot fight. I do not desire feasts or hunts or anything else people expect of kings. Nah. Oh. Those things have given us nothing but trouble, Davos said. Maybe it's time for a king who doesn't want the job. A king who knows our stories, Sam said quietly. All of them, who remembers what happens when we lie to ourselves. A king of memory, Tyrion said. Not of swords. Bran looked at him. You would support this? He asked. I would support anything that keeps me off that cursed chair and my neck out of a noose, Tyrion said. Besides, those of us who broke the weave owe it to the world to put someone in place who will remind people it existed. Jon exhaled slowly. I would not have him anywhere else, he said. Sansa's jaw clenched, then relaxed. The North will be independent, she said. But we will honor you, Bran, always. You are still my brother. I have always been, Bran said. We will never stop arguing with you, Arya added. I would be disappointed if you did, Bran replied. Daenerys studied him, long and searching. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy some measure within her. Very well, she said. Let the boy who sees all sit where others sat blind. We will build something new around him. Bran's eyes went distant, then refocused. It will not be easy, he said. There will be lords who object, priests, merchants, men whose only story is of themselves upon a throne. But change has always been difficult. That is why magic was so tempting. His mouth quirked. It lets you skip the hard parts. Not anymore, Tyrion said. We have removed the shortcuts. All that remains is talk and work. Good, Sansa said. I have always preferred work. Some of us prefer drink, Tyrion said. But we will manage. The council did not end in that one conversation. Of course it didn't. There were days of argument, revisions, shouting matches, sore throats, sleepless nights. Ink was spilled and torn. Old grudges flared and were either settled or set aside. Tyrion found himself doing what he did best, listening, calculating, coaxing, insulting when necessary, soothing when he had to. He was no longer guiding the weave of magic, but the more familiar one of men's ambitions and fears. He realized slowly that he preferred this. He drafted charters with Sam and Davos, arguing about representation for cities versus countryside, about how many seats a region should have based on population and grain output, and historical grievances. He negotiated with Yara over the slave trade, closing doors Ironborn had relied upon for centuries, and offering them access to ports instead. He listened to Gilly describe what it meant to flee south with a babe, and tried to ensure that no future refugees would be turned away at gates for want of proper names. He wrote with Bran, late into cold nights, putting down what they knew of the weave, of the vault, of the long-hidden war. Bran's account was sparse, almost clinical. Tyrion's was a jumble of anecdotes and sharp, painful insights. Between them, something like truth emerged. He drank less than he once had. At some point in those weeks, Jaime disappeared. Tyrion realized it over a breakfast of porridge and bacon when he reached for a cup of wine that wasn't there. Jaime always stole it halfway through the meal, purely out of habit. The empty place beside him felt wrong. He found Brienne in the courtyard, practicing with a sword despite the crust of snow. She had always looked like a contradiction. A knight in body, but not in name. A woman in armor who moved with a grace that made most men clumsy by comparison. Now, she wore a white cloak over her mail. Still trying to beat the snow into submission? Tyrion asked. It yields less than men do, she said, lowering her blade. But it doesn't scream. Have you seen my brother? Tyrion asked. Brienne hesitated. He left at dawn, she said. There was something he felt he had to do. Always something, Tyrion muttered. Did he at least leave a note? Brienne produced a folded scrap from a pouch at her belt. Tyrion took it, unfolded it, and read, Little brother, I am not built for councils, or libraries, or whatever we are calling this new form of torture. I leave the words to you. There are some debts I must pay in person. Not the kind father meant. The other kind. If I don't come back, remember, I did save the city once. Try not to let anyone write too pretty a song about me. Jay? Tyrion blew out a breath. Idiot, he said with no heat. He has much to atone for, Brienne said awkwardly. He believes some of it should be done with his own hands, not yours. Tyrion folded the note carefully. If he dies saving some miller's child from a runaway cow, I will never forgive him, he said. Heroes are such inconvenient creatures. Brienne's mouth, surprisingly, curved. He is trying very hard not to be a hero, she said. That usually means he will become one anyway. Gods help us all, Tyrion murmured. When the time came to choose a hand for the new king, there were few who truly wanted the job. Davos demurred, claiming he knew too little of highborn intrigues. Sam wanted his library. Sansa had the north. Daenerys the south and east to attend to. Yara, the seas. Gendry, Storm's End and its forges. Arya was halfway to a ship heading west by then, restless and curious. That left Tyrion Lannister, who had already done the work without the title. You know they will hate you, Sansa observed, when the question was put to him over a shared cup of hot wine. They always do, Tyrion said. It would be disorienting to be well loved. They will blame you for the old wars and the new changes, Sansa said. For melted thrones and burnt towers, and the fact that they must share power with people they once ignored. Doubtless, Tyrion said. I find I do not care as much as I once did. Perhaps I am growing. They will also need you, Sansa said. Bran will need you. He sees too much. You see, just enough. Is that a compliment? Tyrion asked. A warning, she said. He looked out over Winterfell's courtyard, where new walls were being raised, where children played in snowbanks that still bore faint scorch marks. I have spent a lifetime being the cleverest man in the room, he said. Or trying to be. It brought me some amusement and very little peace. This is harder. There are no artifacts to move history for me. Only other people with their own stories. I think I would like to try. You'll make a terrible hand, Sansa said. Oh, undoubtedly, Tyrion said. Which is precisely why I should be one. Only a man quite aware of his inadequacies should be allowed such a job. And see, when Bran was anointed, no crown, only a simple circlet of unadorned bronze. More like something a shepherd might wear than a king. It was not in the ruins of King's Landing, but in the God's Wood of Winterfell. The weirwood watched, red sap gleaming at the corners of its carved eyes. Snow fell, soft and slow, melting on warm faces. Lords and ladies knelt. So did blacksmiths and seamstresses and former slaves and sailors and wildlings. Not all, and not all with enthusiasm, but enough. Some remained standing at the edges. Sansa, proud and separate. Yara, restless. Daenerys poised like a drawn bow. Bran did not look at who knelt and who did not. He simply listened. When Tyrion knelt, the cold bit through his trousers into his knee. He hissed, then laughed at himself. "S hand," Bran said afterward, in the small chamber that had once been Ned Stark's solar. "You will often be more hated than I. I am counting on it," Tyrion said. "Hate is easier to manage than adoration. It at least makes sense." "Be careful," Bran said. "Hatred can also weave." "I will," Tyrion said. "I have had my fingers tangled in enough threads to know when to let go." Bran studied him. "You've changed," he said. "So have you," Tyrion replied. "You smile more. It's unnerving." Bran's lips curved. "The world is lighter," he said. "Without the weave shouting in my ears, there is room for silence now, and for choices." "Speaking of choices," Tyrion said, "what will we do about the Lannisters' old toys? Or rather, the lack of them?" "There are still some," Bran said. "Scattered. Dormant. Doubtful. A sword here, a stone there. They will cause trouble. Someone will always try. But without a central web to amplify their power, they will be local, manageable. Stories for towns, not for realms. Mai, da. You sound relieved, Tyrion observed. "I am tired of the old songs," Bran said. "I would like to hear new ones." Tyrion raised his cup. "To new songs, then," he said. "It took years for the New Order to settle. There were rebellions, of course. There always are, when men who once held unchecked power find it checked. A lord in the Crownlands declared himself true king twice, and was laughed out of his own hall. A Septon in the Reach preached that Bran's kingship was an abomination, and that magic alone must rule. He found few listeners in a world where most people remembered burning buildings and blue-eyed corpses. A group of exiled magisters from Essos tried to summon some forgotten god in the ruins of Valyria, and were devoured by something they had not expected. House Lannister, for the first time in living memory, learned to live without being at the center of every story. They rebuilt Lannisport's docks, not as a staging ground for secret shipments of artifacts, but as a hub of trade. They lent gold, at transparent rates, with contracts that could be appealed to the King's Council. They still made enemies. No lender is truly beloved. But they also made friends among merchants who had once cursed their names. They opened the vault. Tyrion insisted on it. The pale stone room was cracked and half collapsed by then, empty of its hoarded wonders. The only things that remained were faint scorch marks, dust that glittered like dragon glass, and a few carved sigils on the walls, worn almost smooth. He took Bran there once. The king sat in his chair in the middle of the ruined chamber, looking around with calm curiosity. "So this is where it was," he said. "The center you built for the weave." "One of them," Tyrion said. "There were others. The wall, Valyria, your trees, the throne. We were arrogant enough to think this was the most important." Bran touched one of the sigils. "You did much harm," he said, "and much good. It is difficult to weigh. I will settle for not entirely monstrous," Tyrion said. "That is already a promotion." Bran smiled faintly. "The stories will change over time," he said. "People will forget details. They will simplify. Some will curse you, some will praise. That too is part of the price." "We deserve it," Tyrion said. "All of it." Bran's gaze turned inward. "I see a girl in a distant land," he said slowly, reading a story about a house that tried to own all magic. "She laughs and says, 'What fools. They should have shared.' Her brother nods. Then they go back to mending a net." "A humble epitaph," Tyrion said. "I find I like it." "Good," Bran said. "Humility suits lions." When they climbed back to the surface, the sea was calm. The sun glinted off gulls that wheeled and cried. Children were practicing with wooden swords in the yard. Somewhere, someone was playing a pipe badly. The world felt ordinary. Tyrion found, to his surprise, that he was grateful. He returned often to King's Landing, or what was left of it. The city had shrunk, its population thinned by fire, flight, and the wars. The Red Keep's ruins had been cleared away, replaced first by tents, then by a cluster of wooden buildings. The melted slag of the old throne had been gathered and repurposed, bit by bit, into plowshares and nails and hinges. No one wanted those swords to be thrones again. A new hall rose slowly, built of dark stone and plain wood, large enough to hold councils, but lacking the old intimidating height. On its floor, there was no dais, only a circle of chairs. Daenerys spent much of her time there when she was not abroad overseeing freedmen's caravans or negotiating with city leaders who had once been slaves. She had refused any title that bound her to one land. "I have been queen of too many crowns," she told Tyrion once. "Khaleesi, Misa, breaker of chains. Let me be. Daenerys, that is enough." "No, that you will never be just a Daenerys," Tyrion said. She gave him a sideways look. "Nor will you ever be just Tyrion," she said. "There is no undoing some things." "True," he said. "But we can try to make the things we do next worth remembering for better reasons." They often argued, sometimes bitterly, about the pace of change. Daenerys wanted swift justice, swift reform, swift redistribution of wealth. Tyrion counseled caution, not out of cowardice, he told himself, but out of a sense of how men balked when too much was asked too fast. "Do not mistake patience for complicity," she snapped once, when he urged waiting another winter before opening certain gates to refugees from Essos. "Do not mistake fire for justice," he shot back. "You are not the only one who has burned too hot and regretted the ashes." They glared at each other. Then slowly, both looked away. "I forget," she said quietly, "that you broke your own house fire to keep ours from consuming everything." "I forget," he replied, "that you walked into a pyre for your people before you ever set foot on our shores." They compromised more often than not. In Winterfell, Sansa reigned as queen in the north. She did not need Bran's sight to know the small folk grumbled about new levies and new laws. She had learned in King's Landing how quickly people turned on those who ruled them. She drew on her father's memory when she could, on Catelyn's sharp intelligence when she must, and sometimes, when alone, on the ghost of Tyrion's advice. "Save the people you can, Sansa," he had told her once. The rest will hate you anyway." She did her best. In the distant west, Arya sailed off the edge of the map and found lands no one in their stories had spoken of. Islands where the stars looked different, coasts with high red cliffs, people who had never heard of Winterfell or dragons or Lannisters. She listened to their tales, learned their ways, and eventually taught them some of her own. In a tavern on a shore no maester had ever charted, a child heard for the first time about a girl who had killed a king of ice with a knife made from a falling star, and decided that perhaps girls could do things after all. Jon went north beyond the wall, leading a mingled band of wildlings and worn-out men of the Watch and Northerners who preferred snow to council chambers. The weave no longer hummed under his boots, but the land still had its own quiet magics. The way tracks appeared and vanished, the way storms came without warning, the way the aurora lit the sky like a dragon's breath. He found to his surprise that he was happy there. Not unburdened. Ghosts went where he did, but at peace more often than not. He came south rarely, but when he did, he always stopped at the Rock first, to drink Tyrion's wine and argue about whether wolves or lions adapted better to boredom. "Wolves do not get bored," Jon would say. "Lions do not get cold," Tyrion would retort. They would bicker, and the world would feel less fragile. Years later, when children asked who had truly ruled the realm in those strange days, the boy with the far-seeing eyes, the silver-haired woman with dragons, the red-haired queen in the north, the nameless council of merchants and knights and fishermen. Old men in taverns would wink and say, "Ah, but it was the dwarf in the Golden Lion's Hall who really pulled the strings. Didn't you hear? The Lannisters once owned all the magic in the world." And the children would laugh and say, "What fools. They should have shared." Perhaps that was the truest measure of what had changed. Once, such tales would have been whispered in fear or with bitter envy. Now, they were told as warnings, as reminders, as proof that power, hoarded, consumed itself. Tyrion heard one such story once, years into Bran's reign, in a small inn near Fairmarket. He was traveling incognito. Not an easy task, given the shape of his body and the sharpness of his tongue. But he had learned that if he wore no lions and asked poor questions, most people saw only what they expected to see. The inn's hearth was warm, the stew was thin but hot. A local farmer, cheeks red from drink, was holding forth to a clutch of wide-eyed youngsters. "So they had a room right under their castle," he was saying, "where they kept all the old witch things, horns that could wake dragons, swords that could cut shadows, stones that remembered every lie told over them. They listened to us through them. The Lannisters. They moved us like chessmen." "Why?" a child asked. "Why didn't they just use their gold like everyone says?" The man shrugged. "Gold buys food and swords. Magic buys everything else. Or so they thought. But it turned on them. In the end, it was their own imp who broke it all. Smashed the toys. Left us with nothing but ourselves." "Nadia." "Good," the child said stoutly. "I don't want wizards listening when I fart." Laughter. Even the farmer chuckled. "Is it true, though?" another child whispered when the noise died down. "About the room? Who knows?" the farmer said. "Old stories grow like weeds. But I know this. The lions pay fair coin now, and their ships bring food when the harvest fails. That's enough truth for me." Tyrion sipped his wine, smiling faintly. When he left, he pressed a silver stag into the innkeep's hand. "For the storyteller," he said. Outside, the night was cold and clear. The stars glittered with the same indifferent brilliance they had worn when dragons flew and others walked. Tyrion pulled his cloak tighter and looked up at them. "We did it, you know," he said to the sky. "We took all your little tricks and hid them away. We nearly broke everything. Then we decided not to. You should be grateful." The stars twinkled on. He laughed and trudged toward his horse. Behind him in the inn, the farmer started another tale, this one about a dragon queen who had chosen not to burn a city. In the north, a boy king dreamed of roots and stones and men with ink-stained fingers. In the west, Waves crashed endlessly against the rock, wearing at it a grain at a time. In a cracked, empty chamber deep beneath Casterly Rock, dust settled. If one listened very closely, with ears that had once heard the weave, one might have imagined, just for a heartbeat, a faint echo of old magic. Not a hum, not a command, not a horn's blast, just a sigh, almost content, as if some ancient tangled net had finally been allowed to lie still. House Lannister's lions slept above, no longer the keepers of secrets older than their own name. They still had teeth. They still had claws. They still, sometimes, tried to draw the world into their games. But they had learned, in pain and fire and dust, that the greatest power was not in owning every throne or every artifact. It was in knowing when to let them go. Gah. The letter that truly began it all was written on cheap, yellowing parchment and smelled faintly of fish. Tyrion found it hiding between a complaint about tolls from a minor lord in the Riverlands and a petition from a guild of cobblers who wanted someone to do something about the new fashion for going barefoot in summer. It was already creased, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times before someone with ink-stained fingers had finally decided to risk sending it across half the realm. He almost missed it. He was in his tower in King's Landing, no longer the Red Keep's lofty heights, but a solid, unassuming structure of dark stone and stout beams on the hill where the old castle had collapsed. Windows looked east over the scars where the sept had once gleamed, now filled with neat rows of low, whitewashed houses, and a triangular square where people sold cabbages and gossip. To the west, the river glimmered. The air smelled of tar and bread instead of wildfire. A good change, he thought. One of the few unambiguous ones. He was 3 letters deep into the cobbler's petition, considering whether to respond with a stern missive about frostbite or a jest about holy men and bare feet, when his eye snagged on a line in the crabbed script of the fish-smelling parchment. "We know you took it," he stilled. The letter had no seal, no flourishes. It began without address or courtesy. "We know you took it. Not you, perhaps, little lion, but your line. Your rock. You dragged it under your mountain and thought the sea would never remember." Tyrion frowned. He read on. "The weave is quiet now. I was a girl when the horn sounded. I remember the scream behind my eyes. I was a woman when the dead came to our woods. I am old now, but not yet so old that I have forgotten how the world felt when the magic sang and how it feels now without it. There is a hole where a song should be. You broke it. You say you saved us. Some believe you. I do not know. But I know this. The thing you took from the smoking sea was not yours. It was the world's. It belonged to no house, no king, no lion. You stole it because you were afraid others would use it first. You hoarded it as you always hoard. Even now, with your clean ledgers and your pretty stories about paying debts, you hold it. You cannot mend the weave. Perhaps it should not be mended. Perhaps we are better without it. But you can return what is not yours. The sea remembers. So do I. If you want to talk of debts, Hand of the King, come west. Far west. To the place where the horizon swallows ships. Ask at the inn called the Last Net. Show this letter. If you do not come, others will." The letter was signed with 3 names, one below the other, as if its author had only decided on the last at the end. Mala of Salt Shore. Mala Waters. Mala No One. Tyrion read it twice more. On the 3rd reading, his lips moved slightly, silently shaping the words. "Something you took from the smoking sea," he murmured. He set his wine aside. His mouth tasted suddenly dry. "Qyburn," he said aloud, to the empty room. "You slippery old vulture. What did you bring back that you never told even us about?" He stared out the window for a long moment, eyes unfocused. Outside, the city continued its noisy, oblivious life. Bells rang. Carts rattled. A peddler's cry floated up, offering hot chestnuts. Tyrion reached for a different letter. Rand's handwriting had grown a little shakier over the years, as if the weight of what he saw pulled at his fingers. The page Tyrion unfolded now was short, like most of the king's messages. "Something stirs in the west," it read. "Not the old weave. A knot of thread left over. Be careful." Tyrion snorted softly. "I am very tired of knots," he told the room. "I prefer my threads cut and neatly coiled." Still, he found himself walking to the chest at the foot of his bed. It was a simple thing. Iron-bound oak, with no secret compartments or false bottoms. Tyrion knew. He had personally overseen its making. He had grown weary of hidden drawers. When a man spent half his life rooting through other people's secrets, he developed a taste for plain carpentry. Inside, beneath honest folded shirts and a spare cloak, lay the listening rod. Or what was left of it. The weave's breaking had shattered most of the old artifacts, but the rod had survived in a diminished form. What had once been a long, elegant length of pale bone banded with bronze was now half its size, the end jagged and blackened as if burned. The sigils carved along its length were faint and dull. Tyrion touched it with 2 fingers. Nothing. No rush of whispers. No distant horns. No faint keening from beyond the wall. No dragon wing beats. No murmurs from glass candles. Only the ordinary sounds of the city filtering up through stone. Voices, carts, the slap of waves against the quays. He lifted the rod. "Anything?" he asked it. Silence. He had not expected otherwise. It had been years since he'd felt more than the vaguest prickle from the thing. Sometimes, when a child in the street below laughed very loudly, the rod would twitch, as if bewildered by such uncomplicated noise. Now, though, as he held Mala's letter in his other hand, he thought, perhaps, just perhaps, he felt the faintest warmth under his palm. "West," he said. "Far west, where the horizon swallows ships." The smoking sea lay east, not west. The ruins of Valyria were far on the other side of that nightmare water. Qyburn had gone there once in secret, on a ship whose existence had been hidden even from most of Tywin's agents. He had come back, changed. Tyrion remembered the thin, feral light in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he laid the horn on Tywin's desk. If there had been something else. Tyrion set the rod down and folded Mala's letter carefully. A Lannister always pays his debts. He had said the words 1,000 times, as boast and jest and threat. He had never really believed they applied beyond gold and favors. Even magic, for all its strange weight, had been in the end only another kind of ledger to his house. Perhaps, he thought, it was time for that to change. He rang the bell for his steward. Within a fortnight, the hand of the king was at sea. The ship was called the Golden Hind, more for luck than for truth. There was nothing particularly golden about her save the lion on her prow. She was lean and fast, built in Lannisport's new yards. Her sails patched in places but strong. Her captain, a woman from Fair Isle with hair like sun-bleached rope and hands like knotted driftwood, had sworn to keep her afloat through anything short of the world ending. "If the world ends," Tyrion had replied, "we will at least have front-row seats." Now, standing on the quarterdeck with the wind tugging at his cloak, he wondered if he might have been a little too eager for the view. "We're farther west than most fools go," Captain Lyra announced, squinting at the horizon. "Past Fair Isle, past the Sunset Sea fishing grounds, past where sensible men turn back and say the gods drew the line here, and no farther." "What do they call this place?" Tyrion asked. Lyra's mouth twitched. "Mostly they call it Where My Cousin Disappeared, or Where That Storm Came From, and other such poetry," she said. "Some of the old salts mumble about the edge, others about the drowning. My grandmother used to threaten to toss us over if we misbehaved and let the horizon swallow us, so perhaps that's what your letter meant." "Comforting," Tyrion said. "And this last net?" "An inn on a rock that barely deserves the name," Lyra said. "A little way north of where we are now. Fisherfolk use it in the short summers when the storms are less murderous. Smugglers, too. And sometimes, stranger folk. She jerked her chin toward the rod where it lay wrapped in cloth, lashed to the rail. You sure you need that on deck? Makes the men nervous. It makes everyone nervous, Tyrion said. That's half its charm. In truth, he had brought the broken artifact up from his cabin only that morning, when the air had changed. It was subtle, nothing like the teeth-rattling pressure of the old weave, but he felt it. A tension, like the moment before a wave broke. The rod had warmed again in his hand, very slightly. West, he murmured now, as if speaking to an old half-deaf dog. We're going west. If you have any complaints, best to make them now. The cloth-covered length remained obstinately inert. The last net was larger than Lyra's grandmother's threats warranted. From a distance, it looked like nothing. A low-humped shape on the water, half lost in mist. As they drew closer, it resolved into a rocky islet, no bigger than the Red Keep once had been, its outer edges jagged and black with barnacles. A thin fringe of shingle ringed it, pocked with boats pulled up out of reach of the surf. The inn squatted above the high tide line, a long, low structure of gray stone and weathered wood, its roof patched with old sails. A net hung from a mast near the shore. It was enormous, woven from ropes as thick as Tyrion's wrist, stretched out on poles to dry. Sprats and larger fish glittered within its knots like trapped stars. There were no other buildings. Cheerful, Tyrion said as they took a boat in. I half expected at least a brothel. This is west, Lyra said. They make do with fish. A few figures watched them from the shingle. Men and women in rough wool and oilskins, faces seamed by wind and salt. Their eyes flicked to the lion painted on the boat's prow, then to Tyrion himself. He had worn plain brown, no sigils. But there was only so much he could do about his height and his face. Evening, he called as he splashed up onto the stones, the tide cold around his boots. I'm looking for an old woman who remembers too much and doesn't know when to stop writing letters. The watchers glanced at one another. A man with a beard that looked like it had been knitted out of rust spat into the surf. Plenty of old women here, little man, he said. Most of them remember more than they should. Which one's yours? Tyrion held up the letter. This one, he said. The man squinted at the script, then jerked his head toward the inn. Seen Malago in an hour back, he said. If she's who you're after, she said you'd come with too much hair and not enough sense. I'll try to live up to expectations, Tyrion murmured. The inn smelled of smoke, fish, and old stories. It was dim, the only light coming from a hearth where driftwood crackled, and a few oil lamps hung from beams so low. Tyrion felt grateful for once not to be taller. Nets and carved bone charms dangled from the rafters. The air was thick with the susurras of low voices. She was waiting at a corner table. Mala was older than he had expected. That was the first thing he noted. He had imagined someone 10 or 15 years his senior. This woman looked like she had been carved from salt and rope and sun art. Her hair was as white as the foam on the rocks, braided back from a face lined in 100 directions. Her hands, clasped around a clay mug, were knotted with veins and scars. But her eyes were sharp and dark and steady. She watched him approach without rising. You, she said. I have a lamentable habit of doing what strange letters ask of me, Tyrion said, sliding onto the bench opposite her. It's put me on more thrones and more gallows than I care to count. The corner of her mouth twitched. You sit on chairs now, she said. That's an improvement over swords. Some days, he said. You are Mala of Saltshore? I was, she said. Then I was Mala Waters, while the men who thought they owned me argued about whose mistake I was. The last one is truest. Mala no one. That's the name I earned when the weave screamed and I lived. Tyrion studied her face. You felt it, he said quietly. The horn, the dead, the breaking. I was a child when your Keyburn's horn screamed in my head, she said, eyes distant. I was gutting a fish on the shore. I dropped the knife and clawed at my ears. The sea went strange for days after, tides too high, currents wrong. We thought the world was ending. Then, quiet. A quiet that wasn't silence, if you understand me. Bow. I do, Tyrion said. I was in a vault full of bones when we blew it. I thought my head would split. The weave did not appreciate being shouted at. He leaned forward. What did Kid Qyburn take, Mala? Beyond the horn. He wrote of something else, something stolen. He went to the Smoking Sea twice, she said. Once for the horn, once for the other thing. Your father paid for it with gold that never saw a ledger, on a ship whose name never touched a dockmaster's book. Then, Tinka. I gathered that, Tyrion said dryly. What was it? Mala's gaze flicked to the rod where it lay wrapped near his elbow. That we'll remember, she said. If anything does, even broken, it holds more than you want to know. You credit a stick with more patience than it deserves, Tyrion said. Still, he unwrapped the rod and set it between them. The inn grew quieter. Not because of anything the rod did. There was no flare of light, no crackle of unseen energy. But because people at nearby tables saw a stranger lay an odd bone and bronze object on the wood and recognized, with the old instinct of folk who live near uncanny things, that they should pay attention. Mala reached out and touched it. Her fingers trembled slightly. You always kept your hands on what you stole, she murmured. Never far away. That's the first thing I dislike about you lions. You can't leave things buried. You dug up your own letter, Tyrion said. Curiosity is hardly a sin reserved for my house. No, she said. But you have more teeth to give it. She closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing. Then, faintly, Tyrion felt a prickle up his arm. Not the overwhelming flood of the old days. Nothing like that. This was more like pressure on the skin, as if the air had thickened around his hand. The rod warmed further under Mala's touch. She sucked in a breath. Cold, she whispered. Fire. Bones that were never men's bones. Chains of light. A stone, not stone. Glass that never cooled. A heart that never beat. Her eyes snapped open. She yanked her hand away. What did he bring? Tyrion pressed. A heart of glass? A shard, she said. Her voice was hoarse. Of something bigger. The Smoking Sea is full of them, if you know where to look. Bits of the dunes first scream, turned hard. You can cut yourself on it. Or worse. Qyburn found one piece large enough to hold. He wrapped it in spells he barely understood and brought it to your rock. Tyrion's mouth was dry again. What did he call it? She smiled without humor. The Weir Shard, she said. He thought it witty. You lions like puns almost as much as you like debts. Nah. Where is it now? He asked. That's the question, isn't it? She said softly. He meant to use it as a... What did he write? An amplifier. A way to bind the weave tighter around your rock, draw more lines to you. But the weave broke before he finished. And after, he had other priorities. So do you. He hid it, Tyrion said. Where better, Mala said. Than among other things that would scream if the world tilted. He sank it in a net of bone and iron at the bottom of your vault. Your breaking cracked the net, but not the shard. It slipped away. Into the stone. Into the sea. You thought you smashed everything, lion. You missed a piece. Madame, knew. Tyrion stared at her. You say that as if you know it, not as a guess. I told you, she said. The sea remembers, and some of us remember with it. There are lines even now. She tapped her temple. Not as loud as before, just a tickle. Enough to know when something of the old weave twitches. When the shard woke, I felt it. West, under rock. Under a lion's paw. Tyrion closed his eyes. He saw, in his mind's eye, the broken vault beneath Casterly Rock. Cracked walls, empty brackets where skulls had once hung. Dust that glittered. He had driven the listening rod into the floor there, using it as a knife to cut the weave. In doing so, he had driven it through more than stone. He had felt resistance. He had thought it was just the fabric of the weave itself. 7 hells, he whispered. It was there, all along. Mala watched him. You did not know, she said. I did not know, he echoed. This is becoming a tiresome theme in my life. She shrugged. Ignorance is not always a sin. What you do once you know is what counts. What would you have me do? He asked. Dive down and fish it up like a particularly spiteful oyster? I would have you pull your paw off it, she said. It's not meant to be kept. Not by you. Not by anyone. And if I don't? He asked. Her gaze went distant. For a heartbeat, she looked almost afraid. Threads, she murmured. Short ones, tied in wrong places. Little magics popping up like mushrooms after rain. A boy lighting fire with his hands in a village that should never know such things. A lord's daughter dreaming of dragons she's never seen. A priestess in lists seeing visions in a dry bowl. Harmless, each of them, until they tangle. The shard gathers. It calls. It wants what it once had. Nay. Tyrion thought of Bran's letter. Something stirs in the west. Not the old weave. A knot of thread left over. How long? He asked. Years, she said. Decades, perhaps. The world is big. The weave is still mostly dead. But you know what happens with debts, Lion. They don't vanish. They sit. They grow interest. Tyrion grimaced. I am long acquainted with the concept. The shard belongs to the world, Mala said. Not to Lannisters, not to Starks, not to dragons. If it must be unmade, let it be unmade by all. If it must be kept, let it be kept in the open, named watched, not hidden in your mountain. You have a great deal of faith in other people, Tyrion said. It's almost charming. In my experience, giving men a powerful object and expecting restraint is like dropping meat in front of a starving dog and expecting it to discuss philosophy. You broke the weave, she said. Maybe you can break the shard, or break the habit of hoarding it. Nay. 2 breakings for the price of 1, he said. How generous. He sat back, rubbing his temples. Very well, he said at last. I will go home. I will ask the rock what it's sitting on, and then if I survive my family's reactions, I will send word. Will that satisfy the sea? The sea cares nothing for your promises, Mala said. But I will be satisfied if you keep them. And if I do not? He asked. She reached out and tapped the rod again, lightly. Then others will, she said. The shard is calling quietly now. It can call louder. I would rather you lions answered, while you still remember what it means to let go. No, and my. On the voyage back, the rod vibrated constantly, not violently, not with the old weave's myriad voices. It was more like the constant purr of a cat lying on his lap, a reminder, a pressure. Something's chewing on that stick, Captain Lyra observed, watching it. If it starts talking, I'm throwing it overboard. If it starts talking, I'm listening very carefully, Tyrion said. Then, perhaps, I will throw it overboard myself. He wrote to Bran from his cabin, the ship's movement making his script more jagged than usual. There is a shard under my rock, he penned. Qyburn's second prize. It is drawing stray magics like crumbs. We may have to decide whether to sweep them up or invite the ants. Bran's reply was waiting for him in Lannisport. The boy had grown into a man without growing at all. His mind, at least, seemed further away each time they spoke. The letter was short. You will have help. Tyrion snorted when he read it. Of course I will, he told the gulls wheeling overhead. I am never allowed to do anything miserable alone. Casterly Rock rose out of the sea like a lion half asleep, its flanks scarred by quarries and old mine mouths, its golden banners snapping in the wind. Tyrion had always loved and hated it at once. It had been his cradle and his cage. Now, As the carriage rattled up the steep road that curled around its side, he saw new things. Terraces cut for gardens, canvas awnings shading work yards where carpenters and smiths labored on ships' fittings and wagon wheels. A new lower gatehouse, built after the last, had developed worrying cracks during the weave's break. The lion's mouth over the main arch had been recarved. Its teeth were a little less prominent now. It still looked ready to bite, but also perhaps to yawn. Lord Martin Lannister met him in the Great Hall. Martin was Kevin's grandson, a solid man in his 30s with a face that would have been pleasant if he did not worry it so often. He had taken the lordship after his father's sudden death from a chill that had turned to fever one winter. Tyrion had been in King's Landing at the time, and the letter telling him of the funeral had arrived 3 weeks late, the ink already smeared. "Uncle," Martin said now, bowing. "The rock is yours, as always." "It's yours," Tyrion corrected. "I just come to rearrange the furniture." Martin managed a strained smile. "You pick a fine time for redecorating," he said. "There are rumors, letters, tales told in taverns about what we did in the old days." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "They finally noticed?" he asked. "We must be losing our touch." Martin grimaced. "This is not jest, Uncle. People are afraid. Some say we still have the old magic. Some say we mean to get it back. A few fools say we should. That the world was better when lions roared in more than one way. Fools," Tyrion said, "have always been plentiful. Their song doesn't change the tune. But I did come to talk about the rocks. Foundation." "Nah, no." Martin's shoulders hunched. "You mean the vault," he said. "The cracked chamber and its dust. I've half a mind to fill it in with stone and pour salt over it for good measure." "You'd need more salt than even this sea can spare," Tyrion said. "There's something still humming down there. A shard. I intend to find it. I'd appreciate you not collapsing the ceiling on my head while I do." Martin stared. "A shard of that?" he whispered. "You said you broke it, that you ended it." "I ended most of it," Tyrion said. "Apparently we missed a piece. We Lannisters have never been good at doing things halfway, but in this case, we managed." Martin scrubbed a hand over his face. "The gods mock us," he muttered. "They do," Tyrion agreed cheerfully. "But we can mock back. I'll need a guide down there. Stone has shifted since I last visited, and I suspect I am not the only one interested in what lies beneath our feet." He was right. They went down with torches. Tyrion, Martin, a handful of trusted guards, a stonemason, and a young woman in a simple brown cloak whose presence had, according to Martin, caused a great deal of comment among the servants. "She arrived 2 days before you," Martin had said. "With a royal seal and a blank face, your king sent her." Tyrion had not been surprised. "Mira Reed," he said now, as they descended past old mine galleries and storage tunnels, their breath puffing in the cooler air. "Lord Howland's daughter. Last time I saw you, you were chasing Bran through the woods or killing men twice your size in the snow." "Nay, nah." Mira Reed inclined her head, a faint smile touching her lips. She had aged, as they all had. A few lines around the eyes, a streak of gray at the temple. But she still moved with that bog-smooth grace, soft-footed and alert. A spear rested easily in her hand. "Your memory is better than most lions," she said. "I carry your king's eyes in this. He cannot travel as he would like. I go where he cannot. So he refuses to let me do my foolishness alone as well," Tyrion said. "Truly, his benevolence knows no bounds." The vault felt smaller than Tyrion remembered. Once, it had seemed vast, a chapel to dread things. Now, with fissures running across its walls and ceiling, with chunks of fallen stone cluttering the floor, it looked more like a cave that had tried to swallow too much and choked. Torchlight flickered across the cracked pale stone of the original wall. The carved sigils were barely visible now, worn by heat and time. Tyrion's gaze went to the center of the room. The listening rod's broken length still jutted from the floor, its bronze bands tarnished, its bone darkened. "You left it here," Mira said quietly. "It seemed fitting," Tyrion said. "A nail in the coffin." He stepped closer. The rod hummed. It was faint, but unmistakable. A vibration underfoot, in the teeth, in the bones. Not the old chorus, but a single note, sustained. Martin swore softly. "You hear it too?" Tyrion asked. "Hey," Martin said, like a bee trapped in a jar. Mira's eyes narrowed. "Not a bee," she said. "A frog? A straining in ice. The king feels it. Through me. Nanda." She closed her eyes, laid her hand on the rod, and bowed her head. Tyrion felt the air thicken again. A prickle ran up his spine. Mira's breath hitched. "There," she whispered. "Below? Deeper. Like a tooth in the jaw. You drove the rod through stone and into it. It bled. It shrank. But it did not die. Can we pull it out?" Martin asked. "Break it? Grind it to dust?" "You can try," Mira said. She opened her eyes. "But be wary what screams when you do." "Old advice," Tyrion said. "I've never been good at taking it." He looked around the chamber. "Qyburn bound it in bone and iron," Mala had said. "A net." It slipped through and the net cracked. Into the stone, into the sea. Tyrion tapped his cane against a fissure in the floor. "How far down till we hit the sea?" he asked Martin. "Too far," Martin said. "And not far enough. The rock's roots go deep. There are caverns below even this that no man has walked in centuries." "Bran says the shard needs to be taken from under our paw," Tyrion said. "We cannot very well pick up the rock and move it. So we either dig down and tease it out like a splinter or He grimaced. "We invite others to help." Martin's expression twisted. "Others," he repeated. "To dig under our home, under Lannister feet." "Yes," Tyrion said. "It makes my teeth itch too. But consider the alternative. We keep this quiet. We try to deal with it ourselves. We fail. Years from now, some ambitious cousin or some fool from the east finds a way to use the shard. Then we have another wave, and this time without the excuse of ignorance." Martin flinched. "We do this in the open," Tyrion said. "In front of Starks and Targaryens and whoever else cares to watch. We name it. We decide together whether to break it or bind it. And House Lannister finally, truly, stops playing keeper of the world's secret toys." Mira was watching him. "You sound like a man offering his own throat," she said. "I've had worse things on it," Tyrion said. "Besides, a Lannister always pays his debts. The world is owed this. It was not easy. No one liked the idea of opening the rock to strangers, even in a limited way. Lannister pride was stone deep. The memory of the old horde, the diadem, the daggers, the eggs, the horns, was still raw. Some of Martin's bannermen muttered about betrayal. Others whispered about opportunity. A few, the ones whose fathers had been closest to Tywin's schemes, spoke in darker corners about the possibility of reclaiming what had been lost. "They say you broke the weave too soon," one of them snarled at Tyrion in the Great Hall one night, drunk on fear and wine. "That we could have ruled it. That we could have kept the dead away and the dragons under our thumb. That we could have been kings in truth." Tyrion, who had long since grown tired of being insulted with elaborate subtlety, appreciated the bluntness. "Ruled what?" he asked. "The mad and the dead? The shards of a doom older than our hills? We could barely keep our own family from eating itself." The man's hand twitched toward his dagger. Martin's guards were faster. The argument ended there, with some bruises and a night in a cell, but the muttering continued. It helped that Bran sent a raven to every major house, inviting them to the rock. The last great councils of the realm had taken place in Old Town, Harrenhal, or King's Landing. The notion of lords and ladies crossing the war-torn land to gather under Casterly Rock's banners was enough to set tongues wagging from White Harbor to Sunspear. Tyrion was not interested in pomp. He wanted witnesses. They came in trickles and clumps. Sansa arrived first, snow still dusting her cloak from the northern passes, guards at her back, and that familiar, cool assessment in her eyes. "You choose interesting places for your games," she said after the formal greetings. "I am trying to put away my toys," Tyrion said. "I thought it fitting to do it in the nursery." Jon came next, from the north, his cloak smelling of pine and snow, Ghost padding silently at his side. He hated being south, but he came because Bran asked, and because some part of him understood that the echoes of the old war still rang in these stones. Daenerys sailed from the east on a ship hauling grain, her dragons wheeling high above. They did not like the rock's cliffs. The updrafts were tricky. Rhaegal nearly sheared a wingtip on a jutting spire and roared his displeasure. "They feel something here," she told Tyrion, watching them with narrowed eyes. "Something they do not like." "They have good instincts," Tyrion said. Representatives from Dorne and the Reach and the Vale followed, along with a few Free City envoys who had sniffed out that something unusual was happening and did not wish to be excluded from any reshaping of rules. Last of all, a few days after the others, came a stranger delegation. A tall woman in rough gray leathers with a knife of obsidian at her belt, accompanied by a boy barely into manhood whose eyes seemed too old for his face. "Mala sends her compliments," the woman said, bowing slightly. "And her complaints, which are many. I am her granddaughter. Call me Seth. This is Arno. He hears things." Arno's gaze flicked briefly to the listening rod where it now rested on a table in the great hall, wrapped but still somehow more present than most of the people in the room. He flinched. "It hurts," he muttered. "Good," Tyrion said. "Perhaps it will be kinder to others, knowing that." They gathered in the hall where Tywin had once held court, where songs had been sung about rains drowning and Tarbecks burning, where debts had been carved into men's backs. Now, benches circled a central space where a square of the stone floor had been cleared. "We are not here to choose a king," Tyrion said when the murmur had settled and the last of the latecomers had found seats. "We already have one. We are not here to argue borders or taxes. We will no doubt find ways to do those things later. Today, we are here to look at a splinter." Murmurs. Frowns. "A splinter of what?" asked a Reachlord. "Of the worst wound we ever inflicted on the world," Tyrion said. "The Dooms scream, the Weaves strangling. Call it what you like. We have a piece of it under our feet. We must decide what to do with it." "Break it," someone said immediately. Gendry Baratheon, now Lord of Storm's End, crossing his arms. "Smash it to dust. Throw the dust in the sea." "Into my sea," Seth muttered under her breath. "Can it be broken?" asked Sam, who had come from Winterfell's growing library with ink on his sleeves and excitement poorly hidden behind caution. "Some things can't, not by hammers." Bran's voice came from Mira's mouth. It was a disconcerting trick if one wasn't used to it. Tyrion watched several gentlemen flinch. "It can be unmade," Bran said. "Nothing that was made is beyond unmaking, but the manner matters." "A weir shard," Daenerys said thoughtfully, rolling the unfamiliar word on her tongue. "A shard of the Doom's first cry. Valyria's ghosts. Dragon's birth. Slaves' chains. It may have drunk too much to simply crack. It has been wounded before," Mala's grandson Arno said suddenly. His voice was soft, but clear. "When he broke the weave." He nodded at Tyrion. "The rod pierced it. It bled. It remembers. Do we want to make it bleed in?" Yara Greyjoy asked, lounging with her boots up on a bench in flagrant disregard of Casterly Rock's dignity. "It might scream this time, and I don't fancy another horn's worth of screaming in my skull. Or we could use it, muttered one of Martin's bannermen. If it calls magic, we could... Finish that sentence, Sansa said coldly, and I will have you escorted from this hall before you choke on it. The man subsided, red-faced. It is a temptation, Tyrion acknowledged. For all of us, for every house that has ever had to watch the world come apart while praying that their walls and their luck hold. The shard is power, and power is, as we know, a wine that does not keep well in closed bottles. And yet, Sam said hesitantly, magic was not only harm. It healed sometimes. It warned us. Without Bran's sight, we might have lost at Winterfell. Without dragons, we might never have broken the dead's lines. Without some old vows and some old songs, we might not have found reasons to stand together at all. If we break every last thing that ever carried magic, we may lose knowledge that could help. Later. Nani. Empire. Knowledge can be written, Bran said through Mira. Stories told. That is why I asked for a library. But shards that call power to themselves like hungry men call favors, those are harder to keep honest. Let it be a council's burden, Daenerys said. Not a house, not a king's, not a queen's, not a lion's. If we decide to break it, we do it together. If we decide to keep it, we guard it together. In a place no home can claim as its own. Somewhere between. Between? Yara snorted. You mean in the bloody sea? In the north, Sansa said. At the wall, or what's left of it. It has stood ruined before. It can stand watching one more thing. Or here, Martin said, surprising everyone. Himself most of all. We broke it here. Perhaps it should end here. No more things under your mountain, Seth said flatly. You've hidden enough. If it stays, it should be where many eyes can see. Where people can walk up and spit on it if they choose. Nay, Empire. If it stays, Tyrion said, it will be argued over every generation. Some fool will always say, we should use it. Some clever man will always find a new reason. Some desperate people will always see in it a chance to avoid pain. That is its nature. That was always the problem with the weave. It made cowards brave and brave men. And breaking it might break something else, Sam said. Something we aren't ready to lose. There is no choice without cost, Bran said. We know this. Tyrion looked around at them all. Lions and wolves, stags and krakens, sun spears and flowers, dragon and deer, and rough men from the far shore. People who had once tried to kill each other. People who still might, in some other story. Here now, they sat in his father's hall, arguing about what to do with a shard of the doom. It would have made Tywin Lannister grind his teeth. It made Tyrion smile. Very well, he said. Enough talk above ground. If we're to argue, let's argue in front of the thing, not over its imagined virtues and vices. They went down in a long procession. Not all. Some remained above, guards, skeptical lords, those who disliked deep places. But enough. The vault seemed smaller still with so many bodies pressing in. Torches flared. Shadows leaped. The listening rod hummed more loudly now, as if offended by the crowd. Arno winced. One of the Reachlords clapped his hands to his ears. Will it get louder? Daenerys asked quietly. If we pull it out, Mira said. Yes. Tyrion took a breath. I drove it in, he said. It seems only right that I pull. He stepped forward. The rod felt hot under his hands, as if someone had left it in a brazier. He tightened his grip, gritted his teeth, and pulled. It resisted. Not with the immovable stubbornness of stone, but with a sort of clinging reluctance, like an old scab tearing free. The humming rose, higher, sharper, worming into his jaw, his skull, the tender places behind his eyes. He pulled harder. For a moment, nothing budged. Then, with a sickening, soft, wet sound, the rod tore free. For an instant, there was only darkness. Not the darkness of a room with no light. A different darkness. A feeling. A pressure. As if something indescribably vast had opened one eye far below them. Tyrion saw, not with his eyes. He could not have said how. A shard of something that was not quite glass, not quite stone. It glowed faintly blue-white, like moonlight trapped in crystal. Lines of thin brightness stretched from it in all directions, up through rock and sea and air, outward toward distant fires and sleeping trees, downward into depths no man had named. He saw the wall, diminished but still there, one of those lines brushing its top. He saw a woman in liss, staring into a bowl of cold water, flinching as the water flickered. He saw a child in Dorne, holding out his hand to a lizard, and watching, delighted as a spark danced between his fingers and the creature's snout. He saw a dragon turning uneasily in sleep, smoke curling from its nostrils. He saw Bran far to the north, sitting beneath a weirwood, eyes white, mouth set. He saw, faint and almost forgotten, the old shape of the weave, the great ropes and knots that had once dominated all. They were frayed now, tatters. The shard was a knot that remained, smaller but stubborn. "Break," Bran's voice said, not aloud, but in the place where the weave had once spoken. Not command. Plea. Plea. Not only my story. The shard pulsed. Tyrion's hands shook. Someone grabbed his shoulder. Seth. Her grip was like a clamp. "Let go," she hissed. "If I do," he managed through gritted teeth, "it may snap back." "Good," Yara said. "Let it go sulk in the dark for another 1,000 years. We don't know what it will do," Sam cried. "If it recoils. If we keep holding, it will keep pulling." Daenerys snapped. "And someone will always have hands on it. That's worse." "You cannot keep it," Bran said through Mira. "You cannot keep the world like this, half quiet, half singing. It will tear itself trying to reach one state or another." "Nah. Break it," Jon said. His voice cut through the humming like a sword. "We found other ways to fight. We can find other ways again. We do not need this." Tyrion laughed. It came out wild and strained. "Very well," he said. "We have always been better at smashing than mending." He lifted the rod and brought it down. It struck stone and something else. The sound was wrong. Not just a crack. It was like the horn had been, like the weave's scream, compressed into an instant. Light flared, blue-white, blinding. The humming became a shriek, then cut off. The torches guttered. Silence. Tyrion blinked spots from his eyes. His ears rang. The listening rod lay in pieces at his feet, splintered bone and bent bronze. Where it had pierced the floor, a hairline crack radiated outward in a perfect circle. In the center of that circle, embedded in stone, something glowed faintly. A shard the size of Tyrion's hand, fractured down its middle. Its light flickered, sputtered, then dimmed. For a heartbeat he felt the world hold its breath. Then, slowly, the sense of pressure eased. He heard nothing. Not the drowned quiet of the broken weave. Not the oppressive silence of magic suppressed. Just the ordinary layered noises of many people breathing in a close space, of fabric rustling, of someone's muffled sob, of a distant drip of water. "Is it done?" Yara asked after a long moment. "Or are we all about to turn into frogs?" "Frogs wouldn't be the worst outcome," Gendry muttered. Mira knelt carefully, avoiding the broken rod, and extended a hand toward the shard. Her fingers hovered an inch above it, then touched. She flinched. "Cold," she whispered. "No song. Just cold. Like touching stone that remembers winter." "No." "Does it pull?" Bran asked through her. She shook her head. "No, It sits, it sulks, it dies. Arno exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. It's quiet, he said. His shoulders slumped. I've lived with that hum my whole life. I didn't know how loud it was until it stopped. Sam swallowed. Did we just kill magic? He whispered. The horror and fascination in his voice warred. No, Bran said. Magic is not a thing you can kill like a man. It changes. It goes quiet. It wakes. You broke one of its loudest echoes. That is all. He paused, then added, That is enough. Daenerys stepped forward, looking down at the shard. Her face was unreadable. My dragons are still mine, she said. I feel them. They are uneasy, but alive. The wall still stands, Jon said. As much as it did this morning. The weirwoods still have faces, Arya observed, surprising Tyrion. He hadn't seen her slip in behind them. And they still make me uncomfortable. So we didn't end the world, Yara said. Good. I wasn't finished annoying it. Tyrion's hands were bleeding. He hadn't noticed until then. Splinters from the rod's shattered bone had bitten into his palms. Thin rivulets of blood trailed down his wrists. Fitting, he murmured. Lannister blood on the shard one last time. He laughed, a breathless wheeze. I am getting sentimental in my old age. Someone stop me. No, Sansa said. Her voice was softer than he'd heard it in years. For once, let yourself be. He looked up. Their faces ringed him, wary, weary, curious, some still skeptical, some grudgingly respectful, some openly relieved. No one was kneeling. No one was reaching for the shard with a possessive hand. For the first time since he had first seen the diadem in his father's trembling grip, Tyrion felt that House Lannister was not standing alone atop a pile of stolen fire. We should leave it, Sam said suddenly. They all turned to him. Here, Yara said. In a cracked floor in a damp cave under a mountain full of stubborn lions. Here, Sam said. But not hidden. Marked. Recorded. Guarded. Let there be a law that says no one may touch it without a council's consent. Let there be songs about the foolishness of those who tried before. Let children be brought here and told. See? This is what we once did. This is what tempted us. This is what we chose to break. Remember. Make it a monument, Daenerys said slowly. Not a weapon. A symbol, Sansa said. We do like those. A burden, Bran added. Shared. Tyrion nodded. Very well, he said. We will build a cage around it, not to keep it in, to keep our hands off it. It took time. Stonemasons widened the vault cautiously, shoring up the cracked ceiling, carving out a proper chamber around the shard. They built a low wall of clear, thick glass, brought at no small expense from Mire, around the circle in the floor, and above that a lattice of iron so intricate no hand could reach through. At Mira's suggestion, they embedded pieces of weirwood that had fallen naturally from the godswoods of Winterfell and Riverrun into the ceiling, their pale grain watching silently. On the wall opposite the shard, they carved words. They were not pretty words. Tyrion and Sam argued over them for days, quills scratching late into the night. In the end, they read, Here lies a shard of the doom. Men once sought to own its song. They broke the world to bend it. When the world almost broke them, they broke it instead. Remember, every year, on the day the shard had been cracked, a small delegation came. Not large, not ceremonial. Tyrion had no patience for festivals of self-congratulation. A few children of the Rock's household. A handful of scholars from Sam's library. Sometimes a visiting lord, more out of curiosity than duty. Tyrion went whenever he could. He would stand before the glass, looking down at the dull blue-white shard, and listen. He heard nothing but his own breath. Once, many years later, when his beard had gone almost entirely white, and he walked with a cane more for truth than show. He found a girl standing there ahead of him. She was perhaps 10, freckled, hair a tangle of gold and brown. A Lannister on her mother's side, a Smith's granddaughter on her father's. She stared at the shard with her nose almost pressed to the glass. "Does it talk?" she asked without looking up as he approached. "Not anymore," Tyrion said. "Did it?" she asked. "Yes," he said. Louder than anything should. She considered this. "Did you like it?" she asked. "I liked knowing what others did not," he admitted. "I liked feeling clever. I liked believing I could see more of the game board than everyone else." "Did it make you happy?" she asked. He thought of bodies in burned cities, of souls frozen in blue starlight, of the taste of the weave's scream, of Cersei laughing as the diadem bled her, of his father's eyes when Tywin had realized the world was not his to order. "No," he said. "Not really." She nodded, as if that confirmed something she had suspected. "We're learning about it," she said. "In Master Den's class. How you lions were stupid and clever at the same time. Me, and dying, a kill." "That is the kindest description I've heard yet," Tyrion said dryly. "He says we have to remember so we don't do it again," she went on. "But my friend Hara says someone will anyway. Someone always does." "She's right," Tyrion said. "Someone will try. One day. Not with this, perhaps. With something else. That's how stories work. We are very bad at taking warnings from other people's mistakes." "Then what's the point of remembering?" the girl asked. "So that when someone does try," Tyrion said, "those around them can say, 'We know how this ends,' so that they can pull their hands away before they burn." The girl considered that. She looked at the shard for a long moment, then at him. "Do you wish it had never been?" she asked. "The magic, the shard, the weave, everything." He thought of Bran's ravens and Arya's knife, of Jon's ghostly wolf and Daenerys dragons, of Mala hearing the sea, of Sam's eagerness and Sansa's hard-earned steel, of himself, a dwarfish boy who had once thought the world a cruel joke, now teaching children history in a vault under a mountain. "No," he said at last. "I wish we had been better with it. But wishing is cheap. Poetry is cheaper. Memory is all we have." She nodded solemnly, as if he had said something profound rather than merely truthful. "I'm going to be a stonemason," she said. "Not a wizard. Wizards sound lonely." "They are?" Tyrion said. "Stonemasons are much better at parties." He watched her go, light-footed, up the worn steps. When he was alone again, he looked down at the shard once more. It lay there, dull and quiet, like a chip from some older, colder star. He took a breath. "I release you," he said softly. "From our hands, at least. Whatever else you do is not our debt anymore." The shard, predictably, did not answer. He turned away. Above, the rock hummed with ordinary life. Hammers, voices, laughter, arguments over grain and shipping, the clatter of dishes in the kitchens, the cry of a baby indulged by a servant who would later shush her. The sea crashed and receded. Birds came and went. In Winterfell, Bran listened to other stories. In King's Landing, Daenerys and the council wrangled over tariffs and borders. On the wall, Jon watched a storm and smiled into the snow. Arya charted new coasts. Sansa negotiated marriages and harvests. Sam wrote books. Yara cursed and laughed and stole and sometimes obeyed. Mala, somewhere on a rock near the horizon, taught young people to hear just enough and no more. House Lannister endured, not as secret masters of a hidden weave, not as dragons' gaolers, nor as winter's bargainers, as what they had always been beneath the gold and the myths, a family in a castle perched on a cliff, trying with varying success to live with their history. When Tyrion finally laid down his pen for the last time years later, it was not in a vault or a solar full of ledgers, but in a sunlit room overlooking the western sea. On the table before him lay a manuscript, its pages covered in his spidery hand and Sam's neat corrections. The title, written in larger, careful letters, read, "On Threads and Thorns, A History of Power, Magic, and the Folly of Houses," by Tyrion of House Lannister. He had argued against including his family name. Sam had insisted. "Someone must," the big man had said. "Else they'll call it the work of some unknown maester, and forget you were there at all. And that would be terrible," Tyrion had said. "Imagine a world in which people did not blame me for everything." Now, listening to the waves and the distant cries of gulls, he smiled. He thought fleetingly of Tywin in that first hidden chamber, his father's hands trembling inches from the diadem. Of Tydos, wide-eyed and soft, speaking of duties he barely understood. Of Lan the Clever, half myth and half thief, whispering to giants. "We did our best," he said softly. Not entirely sure which of them he meant. It was not good enough. Then, perhaps, it was. He lifted his cup. "To debts," he said. "Paid, unpaid, and forgiven." He drank. The sea took his words, as it had taken horn blasts and screams and laughter, and 1,000 old secrets, and rolled them into its endless song. The world turned. Somewhere, a child blew on her fingers in the cold, and was mildly surprised to see a spark jump. She laughed, clapped, and tried again, and when nothing else happened, she shrugged and went back to helping her mother hang laundry. In another place, a boy sat under a tree and told his younger brother the story of the lions who had once tried to own magic. He embellished shamelessly. His brother laughed so hard he fell over, then asked him to tell it again. In the depths beneath a mountain, a dull shard lay in stone, watched over by carved words and the occasional spider. And above, on banners snapping in the clean salt wind, the golden lion still roared. Not as master of all thrones, but as something rarer and perhaps more enduring. A house that had learned at last that true power did not lie in clenching its claws around every secret and every song, but in knowing which to hold, which to share, and which to let go. Ha! Tyrion Lannister died on a morning when the sea was as flat as hammered steel. The sun came up slow and pale, dragging a thin wash of light across the western horizon. From his balcony in the Hand's Tower, he could see the ships in the harbor etched as silhouettes against it, masts like pins in a board. Somewhere down in the city, a baker's boy was shouting that his bread was the freshest. A fishwife was cursing the price of salt. A gull sat on the railing, head cocked, watching him with one beady eye. He raised his cup to it, hand only trembling a little. "To debts," he said. "You know nothing of them, of course. Lucky bird." The gull barked once and took off, white wings flashing. His joints ached as he lowered himself into the chair by the small table. The manuscript lay there, pages held in place by a stone paperweight carved in the shape of a lion's paw. Ink stood ready in the pot. The words on the last page shone faintly in the early light. "Memory is all we have." He had expected perhaps to add another sentence. Some neat little twist, a final jest, an elegant knot to tie up the loose thread of his life. Sitting there, with the air smelling of ink and sea and the faint, ever-present reek of King's Landing, he found he had no more words. "How inconvenient," he said. He lifted the paperweight, placed it carefully to one side, and straightened the pages. The binding would be done in Winterfell, by steadier hands than his. Sam had promised red leather. Bran had promised a place on a shelf close to the fire. He wondered briefly if anyone would ever read it twice. His heart fluttered oddly in his chest. "Oh," Tyrion said. And then, quite without fuss, it stopped. By the time the servants came with his breakfast, the porridge he always grumbled about and always ate, he was slumped in his chair, head tipped back, eyes half closed as if considering some particularly knotty point of law on the ceiling. One hand still rested on the top sheet. His fingers had left a faint smudge in the margin. The raven that carried the news north startled the rookery's other inhabitants so violently that one fell straight off its perch and flapped, indignant, back up. Bran read the letter in the gods wood. Snow dusted his hair and shoulders. The weirwood's red leaves whispered above him in a wind that did not quite reach the ground. His chair's wheels left shallow tracks in the crusted white. Mira Reed stood nearby, spear planted in the ground, watching his face. "He's gone," she said quietly. "Yes," Bran said. There was no sorrow in his voice. There was no joy either. There was something like satisfaction, something like closure. "He finished the book," he added, as if that mattered more. Mira snorted. "Of course he did. He'd have delayed dying rather than leave a sentence half-written." Bran's fingers brushed the parchment. He was thinner now, his limbs wasted with years of sitting, but his gaze was still clear. "Send for Sansa," he said, "and Sam, and anyone else who loved him enough to argue with him properly. We will see that his words live longer than his bones." "And the rock?" Mira asked. "Will they keep the shard and the book safe with him gone?" Bran looked south, eyes unfocusing as if he might see the distant golden bulk through earth and stone. "The rock will cling," he said. "It is what it does, but he has carved new patterns in it. Others will follow them." Mira's hand tightened on her spear. "You're seeing more," she said. "Beyond now." "A little," Bran said. "The weave is quiet, but threads of chance still twist. His death is a knot. Things will turn around it." "Good or ill?" she asked. "Yes," Bran said. "The rock's bells rang all day. Not in the frantic clanging pattern of alarm, nor in the slow, brutal toll reserved for executions. They rang in the measured, mournful cadence of a house, marking the passing of one of its own. Not a lord, though he might have claimed it. Not a king, though he had advised one. A brother, an uncle, a hand. On the balcony above the main courtyard, Martin Lannister stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the men and women gathered below. The whole household had turned out. Cooks and maids, smiths and stewards, guards in their crimson cloaks, the handful of children who were too young to understand why grown-ups moved more slowly today. Banners hung limp in still air. The golden lion picked out in thread seemed to sleep. Beside Martin, a young woman in a simple blue dress leaned forward on her toes to see better. "Will they send him home?" she whispered. "To be buried here?" "Some of him," Martin said. "Most of him will stay where he worked. He wanted his bones in the city he broke and helped rebuild." He looked down at her. "You don't remember him here, do you, Janna?" She pulled a face. "I remember him once. When I was little, he told me wizards were lonely and stonemasons had better parties." Martin's mouth twitched. He was right about that. Wizards are always invited late, if at all. Janna Lannister, daughter of Martin's sister Elaine and a smith from Lannisport, lion on one side and iron on the other, turned her head to look up at the tower where the shard lay. "Will we tell the story differently now?" she asked. "Without him?" Martin followed her gaze. The path to the vault had been trodden smooth by now. Scholars and children, lords and sailors, all had walked its length at one time or another. The glass and iron cage around the shard still gleamed. The words carved on the wall had darkened with time, the grooves filled with shadow. "No," Martin said. "We will tell it more." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "That's the point, Janna," he said softly. "We're not meant to stop when one voice ends." Years drifted. Winters came and went, none as long or as cruel as the one that had brought the dead to Winterfell. Summers ripened fields and swelled riverbanks. Children grew, and grew, and grew again. In the great hall of Casterly Rock, the lion's mane on the carved pillars dulled, then was polished bright again by diligent hands. The tapestries changed, old ones taken down, new ones hung, some threadbare, some vivid. There were fewer scenes of battles, more of fields, ships, councils. The shard chamber became part of the rock's rhythm. Scholars from Winterfell's library came south to take careful rubbings of the carved words, to sketch the shard from every angle, to argue in low voices about whether it had truly once sung. Wildlings with new, uneasy allegiances shuffled in, squinting at it and muttering that at least the damned thing was caged. Merchants from Bravos and Pentos and Marine peered at it with narrowed eyes, calculating what it might have meant for trade if it had never been broken. Janna became its unofficial keeper. Not at first. At first she was simply curious. She went down when her lessons were done, candle in hand, to press her nose against the glass and read the words again and again until she knew them better than the family tree in the great hall. She watched visitors with the avidity of a child who had spent her early years in a castle crowded with ghosts and gossip and wanted to see if the legends breathed the same air the rest of them did. She watched, and she listened, and she learned. By the time she was 15, men twice her age came down with her and deferred to the way she laid out the history. "This is where the first vault was," she would say, tracing a crack with the tip of a finger. "Where my grandfather's grandfather kept dragons' skulls and horns and eggs and blades, and all the other things he shouldn't have. This is the listening rod," she would say, pointing to the broken bronze and bone mounted on the wall like the skeleton of some strange fish. "Or what's left of it. It used to hum with every old power in the world. He broke it to break the shard." "Why did you keep the shard?" a boy from the Reach once demanded. "If it was so dangerous, why not throw it into the sea?" "Because the sea spits things back out," Janna said. "And because someone would have gone searching for it again. This way, we know where it is. We can keep an eye on it, and we can bring people like you to look and remember how stupid we were." The boy flushed. His father gave Janna a look that might, once, have been called insolent in a Lannister hall. Now, it was only wary. "It seems cruel to keep a piece of such danger where children can visit," he said. "It seems cruel not to," Janna said. "We kept all of it locked away once. It didn't make us wiser." Martin heard of her impromptu tours and summoned her to his sola. He sat behind the desk Tyrion had once used when he was in residence, an old slab of wood scarred by thousands of decisions. Sunlight from a narrow window fell across his hands. "You've been busy," he said when she entered. "I get bored," Janna said. "You get nosy," he corrected. "It's a family trait. Sit." She perched on the edge of the chair. "Uncle Den says my answers are better than the Maesters," she said. "He forgets sometimes that I can hear him." "Maesters tell themselves stories to feel important," Martin said. "We tell ourselves stories so we can sleep at night. You tell stories because you enjoy watching people's faces when you drag the curtain aside. That's useful. It can also be dangerous." No, I haven't let anyone touch it," Janna said quickly. "I watch. I always watch. If anyone reached for the glass, I'd break their fingers." "I know," Martin said. He smiled then, faint but real. "That's why I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to make it official." She blinked. "Officially, what?" "Keeper of the Shard," he said. "Or some less dramatic title if you like. Guide. Warden Dai. Someone people know to ask before they go peering under the rock. Someone who answers for what we did and what we changed. We've spent years saying we want to share the burden. That means we cannot keep all the guarding in the hands of men with titles and long memories. It must also be in the hands of those who will live longest with the consequences." "No. You mean the foolish young," Janna said. "I mean you," Martin said. Her throat felt strangely tight. "What if I leave?" she asked after a moment. "Go to Winterfell. Or Oldtown. Or anywhere. What if I want to see the places our stories talk about instead of standing in a cave?" "No." "Then you will have been the Shard's keeper for a time," Martin said, as calm as if they were discussing grain tithes. "And you will teach the next one. Memory moves. It must." She thought of Tyrion's book, heavy on Master Den's shelf. She had read it twice now, once for the tales and once for the patterns between them. There was something strange about seeing her own house laid out in such brutal clarity by one of its own. No songs, no delicate omissions, just choices described and weighed. "I'll do it," she said. "Of course you will," Martin said. He dipped his quill in ink. "Try not to break any visitors unless they truly deserve it." She grinned despite herself. No promises. Winterfell had changed as much as the rock. The towers were the same, squat, enduring black outlines against gray sky. The walls had been patched where fire had kissed them. New timber roofs gleamed where old ones had sagged. But there were more books now. More ravens. More people from lands that once would have considered the North little more than a frozen rumor. In a corner of the library, beneath shelves carved with snarling wolves, Samwell Tarly turned a page and tried to ignore the argument happening at the other table. "I'm telling you, it doesn't feel like that anymore," said a young man with dark hair and the faint outline of a scar over one eye. "When I touched the weirwood in our god's wood, it was like putting my hand on old bark. Nothing whispered, nothing looked back. It was just a tree." "It's never just a tree," objected the girl across from him, red hair braided back, fingers stained with ink. "The old gods still listen." "You would know," the boy muttered. "You're a Stark." "Half," she said. "The other half prefers fire, but this isn't about me." Sam cleared his throat loudly. "If you're going to fight about theology," he said, "do it quieter. Some of us are trying to make sure your grandchildren don't grow up idiots." The Stark girl had the grace to look abashed. "Sorry, Sam," she said. "Arla's writing a treatise on the diminishing resonance of the weirwoods. I told her she should talk to Uncle Bran first. She says she wants to record what we feel, not what he remembers." "No, that's the point of the treatise," Arla said. "Uncle Bran always sees more than the rest of us. It's skewed. I want to know how it feels to those of us without whatever he has." Sam rubbed his face. "Then perhaps stop arguing about what isn't there and write about what is," he said. "The weave is quiet. We broke its loudest echo under a mountain. The weirwoods still have something. You still dream sometimes, don't you?" Arla hesitated. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Nothing like what the stories say he had. Just hints. A smell. A flash. I dreamed last week that Jory's horse went lame, and the next day, it did. That might be coincidence." "No." "It might," Sam said. "It might not. That's precisely why we write. To tell the difference between stories and patterns." He closed the book he'd been reading and pushed back from the table. "Your uncle is tired," he said quietly. "Tyrion's gone. Mira is getting old. I'm no spring rooster. The people who remember the weave when it sang are fewer every year. If we don't pin down what it was and what it is, it will all turn to songs and superstition. And the next time some bright lord finds a sparkling stone in a cave and decides it whispers to him, no one will be able to say, 'We know where this leads.'" The Stark girl nodded slowly. "Her name was Lyanna, though she insisted everyone call her either simply Lie or please stop naming children after dead people. She had Bran's watchful gaze and Sansa's unwillingness to let foolishness pass unchecked. "Is there going to be a next time?" she asked. "A shard somewhere else? A horn we missed? A candle relic?" Sam looked toward the window where the sky was the color of old parchment. "I don't know," he said. "Magic isn't gone. It never is. It's just quieter. But quiet things can be dangerous when we stop believing in them." He thought of the shard under the rock. He thought of Janna Lannister, whom he had met once when she came north with Martin, peppering him with questions about how exactly dragonglass interacted with dead flesh. "We can't watch every stone," he said. "We can teach people to recognize the shape of the first misstep." Lyanna set her quill to paper. Arla sighed and did the same. In the Godswood, Bran listened. He felt the weirwood's slow, patient life beneath his hand. It no longer thrummed with the voices of 1,000 years. as it had when he had first become what he was. That connection had thinned when the weave was cut and the shard shattered. The world had shrunk in a way. He could still look through Raven's eyes, but not so far, not so many. He could still step backward into time, but not as deep and not as easily. He did not mind. He was tired. He was not old, not in years, but years measured differently when one spent them half in other people's pasts. His body had never quite caught up. Sometimes in dreams he walked, ran, flew. He woke aching. Mira sat on a stump nearby, sharpening her spear for the 1000th time. "Are you ready?" she asked, not looking up. "For dying?" Bran asked mildly. "No, for deciding who will sort through my mess when I do? Almost ought to." "Your mess," she echoed, snorting. "You talk like you spilled flour. Not rewrote half the realm. So who?" He turned his head, looking through the open door of the Godswood toward the castle. Lyanna hunched over her papers in the library. Sam fussed. Sansa argued with a delegation from White Harbor about harbor fees. Arya was somewhere west on some ship, if she was alive at all, refusing to be caught by anyone's sight but her own. "The next king," Mira pressed. "No," Bran said. "That can be argued by people who care about chairs. I want someone to remember, to keep the stories true. To look at shards and know when to say no." Mira raised an eyebrow. "And who is that?" Bran smiled, faint and distant. "Many someones," he said. "That is the point." Daenerys Targaryen stood on a cliff overlooking the sea and watched her dragons decide. They had grown leaner with the world's quieting. Not smaller. No, Drogon still cast a shadow like a falling night when he passed overhead, but less wild in their fire. They tired more quickly. Their flames no longer melted stone. They were still terrifying. They were still beautiful. They no longer felt like god hands on her shoulders. "Where will you go?" she asked, as Drogon's head lowered, great golden eyes fixing on her. There was no answer in words. There never had been. Their bond had always been sensation and impulse and shared heat. She felt, faintly, a pull east. Not back to Meereen. Farther. To stretches of ocean where storms walked and no maps marked shallows. "Beyond our stories," she said. Rhaegal rumbled, tail lashing. "Viserion, reborn in pale gold after the specter of the one who had fallen beyond the wall." Snorted smoke. "You could stay," she said softly. "Be the last piece of old power we hoard. Doom on a leash. Fire on a throne." Drogon snorted, hot breath ruffling her hair. She laughed, sudden and bright. "No," she said. "You're right. That's how it starts. That's how it started before." She stepped forward, laying a hand against his warm, scaled snout. "Go," she said. "Find a place where no one thinks to call you, where you can be something other than a weapon." For a moment, she saw herself, reflected in that dark eye. A woman in furs on a wind-swept cliff, hair streaked with gray now, lines at the corners of her eyes. No crown, no armor, only a scarf someone had knitted for her in a village where they still sang of her as breaker of chains. She saw, too, the faint echo of a girl who had walked into a pyre. "Come back if you like," she said. "Or don't. We'll manage." He huffed, almost a scoff. Then he spread his wings. The sound of them was like canvas snapping, like thunder starting to roll. He took off. Rhaegal and Viserion followed. For a long time, their shadows passed over sea and land and small boats whose owners later told wild tales of being an inch from death. Then, one day, no shadows. Daenerys watched the sky for weeks afterward in idle moments, expecting to see them appear again, impatient and hungry. They did not. The realm whispered about dragons vanishing, about whether that was a good thing or a bad. In taverns and halls, the debates were loud. In her own mind, Daenerys decided it was neither. "It is," she told Tyrion's ghost once, standing in a council chamber littered with maps and cups. It simply is. We find ways to live with whatever Isis throws us. If he answered, it was only in the echo of his counsel in her memory. There are no happy endings in the stories worth telling, only endings that leave room for the next beginning. The next beginning in the rock shard chamber was not dramatic. There were no horns, no screams, no flames, just a hand on glass. Janna saw it out of the corner of her eye. She had grown into her role over the years. Her hair was longer now, tangled into a practical braid most days. Her hands were calloused from helping the masons strengthen the chamber's supports. She had the look of someone who spent too long in cool places, pale skin, bright eyes, a constancy to her presence. She had brought a small group down from the hall, 2 young scions from the Vale, a quiet boy from Old Town who kept asking about the exact measurements of the shard, and a merchant's daughter from Volantis whose green eyes missed nothing. And so, Janna said, for perhaps the 100th time in her life, we decided not to throw it in the sea or to grind it to dust, but to keep it here, so we can see it, so we can remember, so we can say to our children, this is what nearly ended us. The Old Town boy raised a tentative hand. But if it's already broken, he said, if it no longer calls, isn't it just glass now? Perhaps, Janna said. Glass can cut. While she spoke, Volantis watched. The girl, Lysa, she'd named herself upon arriving because the sailors in Lannisport had mispronounced her Valyrian name so badly she'd taken pity on them, had shown interest from the first. Not the vague curiosity of those who wanted a story to tell at suppers, but a sharp, focused attention that made Janna wary. Volantine, Janna thought. They have spent too long worshipping old shadows to let go entirely. When the tour ended, when the others began to drift toward the stair, still murmuring, Lysa lingered. Janna hung back too, under the pretense of adjusting the lamp. You were wrong, you know, Lysa said, when the boy from Old Town had gone out of earshot. About what? Janna asked. You spoke as if this thing caused the doom, Lysa said, nodding toward the shard. But the doom was men's doing. Magic misused. Old powers tempted. This is just a remnant, a memory. Why fear memory? Janna studied her. We don't fear it, she said. We fear forgetting what it did. That's different. Lysa's lips curved. In my city, she said, we carve our histories into pillars. We walk past them every day. Some stop and read. Most do not. They make excellent perches for pigeons. Name. Dylan. And yet you came all this way to see a shard in a cave, Janna said. I am not most, Lysa said simply. Her hand twitched then, almost imperceptibly, toward the glass. Janna's fingers closed, gently but firmly, around her wrist. No, she said. Lysa's eyes flashed. I only wanted to feel if it was cold, she said. You think I can do what your grandfather did, with one hand? I think curiosity is a spark, Janna said. And sparks and old dry things go poorly together. Lysa yanked her hand back. Do you trust yourself so little? She demanded. That you must fear everyone else touching what you touched. I trust myself exactly as much as I deserve to, Janna said. And I trust you not at all, yet. She expected anger. The Volantini's cheeks did flush, but she laughed too, a short, amused sound. At least you know you are arrogant, Lysa said. That is more than most lions can say. She turned then, cloak flaring, and strode toward the stair. Janna watched her go. The shard lay behind the glass, dull and quiet. She stood there long after the echo of footsteps faded, fingers resting lightly on the iron lattice. Not today, she told it. You've had enough hands on you for one lifetime. Lysa did not leave. That was the first thing that made Janna truly nervous. Visitors came and went from the rock all the time. Some stayed the night. Some lingered for a few days. Fewer remained longer than that unless they had contracts to negotiate or family to annoy. Lysa took a room overlooking the sea and filled it with scrolls. "I intend to write," she told Martin when he raised an eyebrow. "About your shard. About your foolishness. About our foolishness. About all the ways men have tried to cage the world's secrets, and how those cages broke." "Nay." Martin had looked helplessly at Janna. "Not my choice," Janna had said. "I don't own the rooms." Now, days turned into weeks. Janna found Lysa in the library in the mornings, ink smudged on her fingers, eyes shadowed, as if she spent half the night staring at the blank wall of her chamber, imagining things that had not yet happened. In the afternoons she walked the rocks halls, asking questions of servants and guards and old miners. At dusk, she went down to the shard. She never touched the glass again. She stood close, hands folded behind her back, and watched it. Sometimes she wrote. Sometimes she simply listened. "You can't hear anything," Janna said one evening when their paths crossed there. "If you're waiting for it to start humming again, you'll die on your feet." "I am listening to myself," Lysa said, "to see how long I can stand looking at it before I start wanting to break the glass. So far, I am encouraged." Janna snorted. "You make experiments out of everything," she said. "Better that than idols," Lysa replied. She asked later if they might go down together at midnight. Janna hesitated. The shard chamber at night was different. Torches burned lower. The air seemed thicker. Old habits made her more cautious then. Tywin had plotted at night. Qyburn had done his worst work in dark corners. The horn had been blown beneath a moon. "Why at midnight?" Janna asked. "Because I had a dream," Lysa said bluntly. "And I don't intend to let a dream dictate my life without testing it." Janna studied her face. "What dream?" she asked. Lysa looked away. "A hand," she said. "Mine. On the glass. Yours, broken on the floor. The shard bright again. Don't look at me like that. I've grown up in a city where red priests scream about visions in every alley. I know better than most how much of it is wine and how much is real. I need to know which this is." "Nay." Janna's stomach tightened. "You think the shard still speaks," she said. "I think my mind does," Lysa said. "The shard is a mirror. It shows us ourselves. That is why it is dangerous." "Mirrors don't make you do anything," Janna said. "No," Lysa agreed. "They only show you the face of the person who decides." They went down together. The castle was mostly asleep by then. A few guards on patrol nodded as they passed, unconcerned. The lower tunnels smelled of damp stone and old salt. Their footsteps echoed. In the chamber, the shard glowed faintly with reflected lamplight. No more. "Touch it," Lysa said. Janna frowned. "We agreed no one would." "The glass," Lysa said. "Not the shard. I want to see if your dream matches mine." "I didn't have a dream," Janna said. "Then humor me," Lysa said. "If nothing happens, I sleep better and stop bothering you. If something does, we inform your king and argue ourselves hoarse about what to do. Either way, we learn." "Nani?" Janna hesitated. She thought of Tyrion's fingers, bloody on the broken rod, of Martin's careful letters, of Bran's distant gaze, of the children she'd walked down here, explaining and warning, forever explaining and warning. She placed her hand flat against the glass. It was cool, smooth. Nothing more. She waited. "Anything?" Lysa asked. "No," Janna said. She closed her eyes. Nothing. No hum. No pressure. No voice. No glimpses of a world tied in ropes of light. Just the faint, familiar thud of her own heart in her chest. "Now you," she said without moving her hand. Lysa hesitated, then put her palm beside Janna's. The glass did not crack. The shard did not flare. They stood there, hands side by side, separated from the thing beneath by 3 fingers' width of Myrish glass, in a decision. After a long moment, Lysa exhaled. I dreamed of my own fear, she said. Nothing more. Fear is reasonable, Jana said. It has kept us alive more often than magic. Lysa looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, her gaze held something like respect. You lions, she said, might one day convince me you've learned. Careful, Jana said. If you admit that here, someone will try to charge you for the privilege. Lysa laughed. They went back up together, leaving the shard to its quiet. In the end, the last echo of the old weave did not come from a shard or a horn or a blade. It came in a story. Bran Stark died in his sleep on a night when snow padded the rooftops of Winterfell and the wind howled faintly around the walls. He had expected to hear voices when he slipped away. He had expected, perhaps, a last rush of ravens' wings, a last glimpse of dragons in flight, a last whisper from trees older than language. Instead, there was only warmth. He dreamed of sitting with his siblings beneath the weirwood in a summer before it had all gone wrong, when Arya still complained about sewing and Robb still laughed easily, and Jon still called Ned my father, without flinching. He dreamed of a boy with legs that worked, running between roots. He dreamed of nothing more complicated than that. When they found him, he was smiling. They buried him in the crypts, as befitted a Stark, with a stone likeness and a direwolf at his feet. In the Godswood, Lyanna sat beneath the weirwood, notebook forgotten in her lap, and cried until the cold bit her cheeks raw. The days that followed were full of arguments. Who would be king? Should there be a king? Should they instead have a permanent council of lords and small folk? Should the North once again pull away and leave the rest to squabble? Sansa did what she had always done. Listened, weighed, decided. She did not want the Southern throne. She made that clear. Neither did Jon. Daenerys was near 60 now and had no interest in taking on a crown that would outlast her. The lords of the Reach and Dorne and the Vale spent long nights in smoky rooms, voices hoarse, faces flushed. In the midst of it, Sam opened Bran's old chest. Among the carefully folded cloaks and the small wooden toys from his childhood was a bundle of parchments tied with a strip of leather. On the top sheet, in Bran's steady hand, were the words, "For the next ones who must remember." Sam read it. Then he carried it to Sansa. They sat together by the fire in her solar, shoulders closer than they had been since they were children. He knew, she said, when she reached the paragraph where Bran calmly described the day the shard would be unmade, years before it happened. Of course he knew. He knew possibilities, Sam said. He was never certain. That's what frightened him more than any visions of doom, I think. The places where he could not see. The last page was short. You will be tempted to think that magic is gone, he had written. That you can ignore it. That is as dangerous a thought as believing you can control it. Remember that power is not only in shards and horns and dragons, but in the way you tell your stories. Do not let one house own them. Do not let one city keep them. Share them and share the burden. If you must choose a king, choose one who understands that. If you can avoid choosing a king at all, better. Sansa laughed helplessly. You would say that, she said. After wearing it for half his life. He didn't wear it like others did, Sam said. He kept it in his mind, not on his brow. Perhaps that's the trick. In the end, there was a compromise. There always was. A council of 9 was formed, one from each major region chosen by the lords and, in some cases, by the small folk. They would meet twice a year in whatever city seemed least likely to poison them. They would draft laws, settle disputes, impress upon everyone that this was terribly important. From among them they chose a speaker. Not a king. Not a queen. A voice. The first was a woman from Old Town with a laugh like a cackle and a temper like a cat's. She had no famous ancestors. She had never held a sword. She knew the price of grain in every town within sight of the sea, and could argue a septon into exhaustion without raising her voice. Bran would approve, Sansa said when she heard. Bran would nod, Sam said, and then go back to his tree. The world moved. Ships crossed seas. New crops were planted. Some failed, some fed thousands. A plague broke out in White Harbor and was contained by a harried healer who had never seen a spell in her life, and therefore did not waste time praying for a miracle before boiling her instruments. A summer festival in Dorne ended in a small riot and 2 new marriages. Under Casterly Rock, the shard lay in its glass, inert, and watched. Janna grew older. Her hair silvered at the temples, though her back stayed straight. She learned to pace herself on the stairs. She learned to listen more than she spoke. She married no one, to the disappointment of some and the relief of others. But she took lovers when she pleased, and arguments when she needed them. She trained keepers after her, boys and girls with sharp eyes and sharper minds, some Lannister by blood, some not. They came from the Rock's kitchens, from the docks, from distant farms. She taught them the names carved into the wall. She told them about Tywin and Tytos, about Tyrion and Cersei, about Qyburn and Mala, about Bran and Mira, about Lysa's dream. "Do you believe it's really broken?" A boy from the Fingers asked her once, peering at the shard. "Yes," Janna said. "How can you be sure?" he pressed. "What if it's just sleeping? What if one day?" "Then we will be here," Janna said. "With our hands on the glass instead of on it. That's the difference. We don't expect the shard to keep itself quiet for our peace. We remember it can scream." He digested that. "And if one day no one comes down here," he said. "If they forget, then we have failed," Janna said. "And someone will pay the price. That is true of many things. It is why we try not to fail." "Many," he frowned. "That sounds hard." "It is," Janna said. "The only things worth doing are. Some nights, when the rock was still and the sea whispered outside, she sat by the glass alone and read from Tyrion's book. Her favorite passage was not about the weave or the shard or the shattering of thrones. It was a small piece buried in the middle, describing a moment when a young boy had tried to stand taller than the world would allow. "Once, I thought that being clever was enough," Tyrion had written. "That if I saw more of the game than anyone else, I would be safe. That was my first and deepest mistake. Seeing is not the same as choosing. Choosing is not the same as living with the choice. We do not get to skip the hard parts. We only get to decide which hard parts we will bear." Janna traced the words with a fingertip. "We choose this one," she said quietly, looking up at the shard. "This hard part, watching, remembering. You don't get to choose for us anymore." The shard did not answer. It did not need to. Above, on the rock's highest tower, the lion banners snapped in the wind. They were not as bright as they had been in Tywin's day. The cloth was patched in places, threads faded by sun and salt. But they held. In the city below, ships from half the known world rocked at anchor. On their decks, men and women told stories. Of dragons that had flown west and never returned. Of dead that had walked once but would never again. Of kings who had sat on thrones of swords and kings who had sat in chairs and boys who had watched the world through birds' eyes. Somewhere, in a tavern, a drunken singer started a song about a house that had tried to own magic. Beside him, a girl rolled her eyes. "Everyone knows that one," she said. "Sing something new." He hesitated. Then slowly, he began a tune no one had heard before, about children born in a quieter world, trying to decide what to do with the stories left to them. The tavern joined in. Some off-key, some too loud. It did not matter. Under the mountain, a shard of the doom lay still. Over it, men and women argued and laughed and loved and erred and tried again, weaving and unweaving their own human magic, as fragile and stubborn as any spell. House Lannister still watched the shadows beneath their feet, but they no longer reached for what lay in them. They had finally learned that the truest power was not in owning every thread that bound the world together, but in having the wisdom and the courage to let some knots stay broken.